Hello, everyone. How are we all going? There we go. But yeah, obviously, you're all aware, you've seen the title. Debating Haz today on Communism versus Capitalism, a task which Jake Shields apparently thought was impossible to accomplish, to find someone to do this, so I decided to go right to the source. Or I can just hang out for like another minute before time for the call. I do have a better camera, it's up there, but it's a DSLR. I can't really be bothered setting it up for usage as a webcam. This has ready, presumably. I mean, he accepted my friend request earlier, so I imagine he's aware that this is happening. Where's the tenants? So I only had a couple left, so I drank them. Got a few from ARCEU here to watch. Cool. Hello, everybody. Yep.
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Well, I'm fine.
Cool. We all good to go? You live?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I suppose, do you want to introduce the stream, or do you want me to introduce the stream? How do you want to play this?
Well, you wanted to debate me, so
Sure, so
I
yeah.
guess the burden's on you. Yeah.
Yeah. Jake Shields was on Twitter saying that he couldn't find anybody to defend capitalism against you and show why communism is bad. So I thought I'd do that. I think communism is indeed bad. It's a very bad way of living. It violates the necessary requirements of human survival and flourishing. And in fact, the communists can't even say that it is moral. You can't even say that it is a moral system, being a materialist.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Anyway, I just wanted to also say that what Jake Shield said is he couldn't find anyone who's prominent. There's plenty of people on TikTok that I debate all the time about this topic. You wanted a more, theatrical or significant forum to do that, and I obliged. So, it's not that he said that there's nobody who's going to debate the topic. He just said there's like no one with a large or substantial following.
Sure. So, I mean, do you have anything to comment on what I said there? Do you think that that communism can indeed be justified in any sort of way?
I mean, yeah, of course. I think what you said is just a claim that I don't even see a reason to entertain. You said that communists can't even justify the moral superiority of communism. I I guess you can just claim that, but I don't know why I should take it seriously.
Well, you are materialists, are you not?
Correct?
So how on earth would there
Wait,
be?
I wanna just ask, just for the purposes of clarification, are you like an Ayn Rand objectivist?
Yes.
Okay, did Rand not identify as a materialist?
No.
Really? Okay. So Rand identified as an idealist and didn't
No.
identify with Aristotelian materialism.
She rejected both materialism and idealism.
Oh, in favor of a secret third thing. I understand.
Yeah, it's called objectivism.
Yeah. Right. Which she did not regard as materialistic, according to you.
She did not.
Okay. So yes, I'm a materialist, if you're asking.
Okay, like do you accept that there's such a thing as free will? Like, could my thoughts somehow cause my actions?
Could your oughts cause your actions? I think I
Thoughts.
wouldn't reduce. Oh, could your thoughts? Well, thoughts also reflect reality in as much as they influence reality, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say you could reduce actions to thoughts, but I definitely think thoughts partake in the affecting of actions or performance of actions.
Okay, so you think that thoughts could influence reality? Like, now this is surprising to me.
I
Like,
think thoughts are a part of reality in some sense. Sure,
well, a part of reality.
they
Okay,
do in fact originate from material causes.
sure, but which way around does the causality go? Like, could I think something and then that causes certain actions that I'm going to take, or would it be the actions I'm taking cause what I think? Like, if I'm engaged in certain modes of production, let's say, then I'm going to think certain things and be like a
Well, what you're
capitalist.
describing is a relationship. And in a relationship, you can't ultimately reduce one to the other entirely. It's a processual relationship. But I would say that ultimately, of course, the material world pre-exists thought and the capacity for beings to think. I mean, I think this is true like biologically on a natural historical level. I don't know if you would disagree with that. But ultimately, thoughts can absolutely influence material outcomes. But then again, thoughts also reflect material realities in as much as they influence them. So it's a relationship.
Okay, so would you say that it would be, for instance, like the type of society you get at some point, that would be due to the thoughts that the men who make up that society hold? Like they want that type of society in some sense, so that's the type of society they have.
I don't think that's a useful question because it begs the question of where the thoughts came from and what realities the thoughts reflect.
Um. Okay, so I'm confused there. So it seems very simple to me. Like, is it
Hmm.
that the society we're in that causes our thought processes, which is what I read Marx as saying, or is it that our thought processes give us some society?
So our thoughts are a reflection of our um, materially embedded practical existence.
Right. So that makes it seem like the materially embedded practical existence is like the fundamental thing there. That's what's giving you your thoughts.
It is fundamental, but you can't say thoughts are reducible to that because thoughts also partake in that. But okay, to simplify it for you from a natural, historical perspective, I don't know if you believe that, but let's just make the assumption. For example, whatever type of hominid that immediately preceded what we regard as a modern anatomical modern human being was materially embedded in a certain type of practice, and this was the inheritance that human beings had before they could even partake in thought as we would uh, recognize it, right? So in a strict sense, yes, the materially embedded practical existence precedes thought. But because thought is a reflection of that, sometimes our only access by way of knowledge to the materially embedded practical existence that we are rooted in is through thought. So it's through thought that we can have access by way of knowledge to our material and practical existence. But that doesn't mean we can reduce it to thought. That doesn't mean that thought is the cause.
Sure. Okay. Great. So that thought couldn't cause a certain society to come into being, right?
No, it couldn't.
Right. That's what I understand the dialectical process to be. Right. It's that the
Yeah.
society you're in, like if you are in a capitalist society, then that's going to you know generate capitalist thoughts in you until the contradictions come about, and then it starts
No,
generating like, okay, sorry.
no, the dialectical framework would say that the capitalist mode of production is internally contradictory on
Mm.
a material and practical level, and that therefore the thing that would be reflected is not necessarily the identity of some capitalist system because no such identity exists. What would be reflected are the contradictions within that system. For example, principally according to the basic Marxist view, class distinctions.
Sure, sure, sure. So okay,
Mhm,
then if these thoughts, the type of society you get, the thoughts that people have, if they are
mhm.
kind of caused by the society they're in, whether from the contradictions of that society, right? They don't have like a specific choice. over what they believe. Like in the feudal era, they can't just randomly start believing in whatever the hell they want, right? They've got to
No,
believe.
surely they can believe in whatever they want, but in order for those beliefs to be material in like every sense of the word material, so I also mean like relevant or significant or like that matter at all, really. They have to adequately reflect the reality in some way. They have to speak to some, for example, primarily, the way material realities have thus far been reflected within people's consciousness is through mystical and obfuscatory terms and so on and so on. And those don't necessarily reflect reality in a sense of containing knowledge of that reality, but they do refer and signify real material realities. Like a peasant, for example, who says that he's like a prophet of God, and it says that he talked to God directly, whatever, and starts preaching a new doctrine. For him to gain any traction, he has to actually speak to real existing class divisions within his society and mobilize other peasants around his banner, and then in this way class distinctions can be given some kind of form. But so anyone is free to imagine whatever they what is within their capacity to imagine, and anyone is free to attempt to act upon the faculties of their consciousness and their imagination. There's no denial of that whatsoever. But in order for that to be historically significant or material in any sense of the word, it has to actually correctly or in some way effectively reflect the historical and material reality.
Okay, so let me just know that down. So, in order for those choices about what they're believing to be historically or materially consistent, they have to reflect like the material conditions. Would that be?
I would say effectively reflect. So there's a key distinction here. Reflect correctly by way of like true or scientific knowledge, not necessarily, but reflect effectively in the sense of effectively communicate this reality, even if indirectly to others, then yes.
Okay. Um. So I'm. So what does it mean for it to be historically significant? Would that be that it is able to like, bring about some change in what the society would be in like the
Yeah, to
future?
participate in the transformation of society in a, what we call history, to partake in the transformation of our specifically human reality.
Okay, so would they have to speak to like the contradictions existing in this system?
Yeah, they would have to somehow they would have to articulate uh, at least a side of the contradiction within the system. So, in order to partake in the contradiction, and for Marxists, the contradiction is what propels the development of history itself.
Okay, so then how would men truly be free in their thought if it could only ever be historically significant for somebody to communicate things and try to convince
Because,
people of things? If they
yeah,
if it
well,
could if people could believe anything, why couldn't they convince people without speaking to these supposed contradictions?
so you're saying, hold on, what are you saying? You're saying, how are people free if they have to actually communicate with others in order to have an effect on others?
No. I'm asking like if people were truly free in their thought, that they could believe whatever they want. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
purely determined by their conditions they're in.
yeah. Mhm.
Then why is it that you can only ever have historically or materially significant communication if it's speaking to some side of the contradiction in the class struggle?
Oh, so you're saying, how can we reconcile the freedom people have to, for example, imagine whatever they want or think about whatever they want, with the fact that in order for the outcome or product of that uh, conscious process to actually be historically significant or material, it has to actually like articulate contradictions within society. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I would say, broadly speaking, when we're talking about the range of permutations that are possible within consciousness or within the imagination, those are actually defined by a definite threshold of what has thus far been experienced or known or possible according to history itself. But the imagination and thought can synthesize and combine these in various different kinds of permutations. What we don't have the freedom to do, for example, is imagine something that, for example, doesn't exist yet. So if I'm living in feudalism, or if I'm living in the ancient Greek slave society or something, I don't necessarily have the capacity to imagine something like an iPhone. The precedent for the discovery of the actual material threshold of what is possible technologically and scientifically and so on doesn't actually enable me to just freely imagine that. And we can see this, for example, the imagination of a given era is stamped by that era. When people are imagining the future in the 19th century, it very much reflects the reality of the 19th century. We can all see that. When people are imagining the future in the Middle Ages, I'm sure it reflects in some way the reality of the Middle Ages. So it's not, so we have to understand freedom is just the ability to basically repeat all of the errors or all of the missteps or all of the one sided um, forms of knowledge and experience that have thus far been accumulated. And I actually think that's not actually the real freedom. The real freedom is when we are able to partake in a contradiction that partakes in a novel historical development. This is freedom as true insight into necessity. Only when there's a permutation, only when there's something that's not simply a permutation of what has already been in some way or another, but actually participates in the novel development of history, can we actually say that there has been a free act of thought or something? So freedom is freedom insight into necessity. I follow, the basic Marxist line on that.
And presumably, that novel act, would that be like the communist society?
Um, yes, but not necessarily across all of history. I think across all of history, you have exceptional acts that do reflect novel historical changes that people partake in. For example, I mean, you could name a whole host of things, right? You could talk about historically significant figures like Martin Luther or Thomas Munzer, if you're more communistically inclined, or you could talk about prophets in the biblical tradition, Jesus Christ, and so on and so on. People who more or less articulated something new that was not simply a permutation of what has already been. And I think that now, yes, I think that now the position of freedom and truth today is the communist outlook. Yes.
Okay, so so there are at least some instances where people are like free over their thoughts, over their actions, and that like would that then entail that their thoughts are able to cause their actions, that they can choose their actions?
Well, I want you to specify what you mean by freedom. So if you, for example, talk about my freedom to, imagine myself as a dinosaur and walk around outside performing, the what I think a dinosaur does, I certainly have the freedom to do that. But what is the actual material essence of what I'm doing? Am I actually doing that, or am I simply, expressing the ability for me to do something that effectively on a material level is proven to be, insignificant or unremarkable or not actually as exalted and as significant as what I imagine it to be?
Um, well, I'm not asking necessarily whether it's significant, whether people are going to go along
Right.
with your acting of a dinosaur.
But am I actually doing that? I can think in my head, I can delude myself into all sorts of different things. I mean, that's like the most ridiculous example imaginable. Let's talk about, for example, we don't, I don't, you can, we can go down this path of debate if you want. But for example, there's a lot of people that call themselves free market libertarians who support and champion the Zionist Javier Milei, who is very much not running a society according to anarcho-capitalist principles. While in their head, they're considering themselves, anarcho-capitalists with these, eternal principles that they consider the bedrock of a real, moral existence. But in reality and in practice, it's something quite different, right? So we need to really hone in on what is and how can we actually articulate the relationship between thought and practice in a way that is actually true, right? Because you can think about whatever you want in a sense, but do those thoughts actually betray or reflect a an understanding of the relationship of thought and practice. That's what a Marxist would respond with, basically.
Okay, so I want to like really hone in on this. Like, are you suggesting that like if you've just deluded yourself into this like dinosaur fantasy, for instance, or the Malay fantasy, as perhaps you
Right.
would call it, um, that but like then the question is, are they actually doing that? Like, are you suggesting
Mhm.
that you might delude yourself into a dinosaur fantasy, but you're not actually going out dressed as a dinosaur?
What I'm saying is that I think that we can deceive ourselves. It's very possible that there could be a misalignment between thought and practice, and we confuse that for freedom. But that's actually not what freedom is. That's just a type of delusion where we trick ourselves by engaging in some kind of conscious act that only exists within our head, which doesn't actually reflect an understanding or knowledge of the practical material reality that's underlying it.
So if it's only in their head, right, this dinosaur person, um, surely they wouldn't then actually be going out dressed as a dinosaur.
Well, they could go out and dress as a dinosaur, but would that be the same thing as being a real dinosaur? I would say no.
Well, yeah, definitely not. But
Right.
the
So
the
that would
point
be my
is,
point.
but the
But
point
but
is
they're
that they can.
fantasizing about being a real dinosaur in their head, right?
But then this at least establishes that thoughts can cause actions.
Well, it causes an action that is very much misaligned with the thought on the terms of the thought itself.
Um,
So, is the thought really the cause of the action, or is the thought just participating in some kind of deeper, more pathological cause, which is the root of the delusion? I think the latter would be true.
what would that like deeper cause? So then are you suggesting that there's something which causes both dressing up as a dinosaur and thinking? Like there's some
Uh,
third thing
if
here.
someone deludes themselves that they are a dinosaur and goes out and dresses as one, I think there is an underlying pathology not reducible to their thoughts that is responsible for both the thoughts and the performance.
Well, what would the pathology be if not referring to like some mental contents? Perhaps misaligned mental contents, but still mental contents.
It definitely the mental content is participating it, but it's absolutely a disalignment between the thought and the practice, which is very possible, by the way. I'm not denying that. But we do tend to colloquially refer to things like that as pathological or a type of delusion or mental illness or something.
So just to be abundantly clear, is this pathological cause of their thoughts? Is that material itself, or is that also mental?
I would say, yeah, the reason it's material is because it's embedded in a specific practical existence that corresponds to, and I know this word is overused, but an alienation between thought and practice, for example.
I mean, does that then not imply that the thoughts are being caused by something material?
Um, in a strict sense, the specific content of the thought, there's just so much variation. It could be a dinosaur, it could be a dragon in terms of what is possible to imagine. But if we are looking for like what is actually essential, what is actually like material here in the sense of like what actually is it, uh, um, uh, despite the possibilities of variation, I think you're looking at a similar structure. And therefore, I think you could say that, yes, in this sense, yeah, material reality determines the content of thought.
So then, this freedom over thought over action, it's actually still just boiling down into predetermination, right?
No, well, I wouldn't say predetermination, because it's not as though you have a specific arrangement of things that make this inevitable. It's more like we have the capacity as human beings to have actual knowledge into our material causes and material conditions. And that knowledge itself participates and partakes in the cause, right? And in the Marxist view, that's true freedom, which is insight into necessity. Is it possible that there could be deviations from that? Yes, but from the perspective and standpoint of practice, um, those can't actually endanger entirely new practical realities. They rather regress from the current existing threshold of reality now as it's in practical development into some kind of, already established, like something that already has precedent that has not been proven to be a new possibility. For example, somebody who is like delusional, they're not doing something unprecedented. They're doing something that within our existing historical threshold has already been established as possible, like a possible permutation of possible activity, for example.
Okay, I'm confused. If it is the case that it's not that there's some specific arrangement of things that make it inevitable that this guy ended up as like a dinosaur fantasy guy,
Right.
then where did the alternative come in? If it wasn't already always going to happen given the arrangement of matter, where did the alternative come from?
The alternative being the true freedom and the Marxist definition. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, the alternative in down one path, he
Yeah.
becomes crazy
Like,
and
why
thinks
are
he's a
there
dinosaur.
different possible paths?
Yeah,
Is that what you're asking?
yeah.
Yeah, well, there are different possible paths to take because not every act can directly correspond to a novel historical act or novel historical development. The possibility of novel historical change depends upon precedent. So it depends upon habits, it depends upon people performing acts which have already been established, whose possibility has already been established, and so on and so on. I'm just saying that only upon this basis is it possible to perceive an opening, right, of something new. And freedom really and only truly corresponds to when thought corresponds to an act that is in alignment with this novel development.
Okay, so
So for example, there are permutations of different possible activity that are established. So in that sense, can you like the whole meme about yeah, free will is crazy. Like you can just walk into a Walmart and start screaming at people. Like that's an established permutation of possible activity. But I would say that like the Marxist argument isn't that that's impossible. It's more like, but that falls under a hard ceiling of already established precedent of possible permutations of activity that are materially determined, and that activity is inconsequential unless it partakes in a novel development. So it's about the consequentiality of the act, and only on that basis can we evaluate uh, where it fits with respect to is it a free act or are you just repeating something that already exists? So it's like it's kind of counterintuitive from the perspective of conventional determinism versus free will. Conventional determinism says what you're doing is preordained, right? And you have no, your acts don't matter. It's just completely preordained, like mechanically, right? And then the free will argument is like, well, no, I have the choice. I have the freedom to do what I want or what I desire. I have the freedom to perform acts that are in alignment with my thoughts. Well, the Marxist view actually inverts that in a way, and it says actually the free thing is to have insight into the necessity. Whereas the arbitrary act of like running into a Walmart and screaming at people, throwing poop or whatever, that's actually more like a causal, deterministic kind of thing, just in the sense that it's just the performance of something that already exists passively, right? It's not an active kind of activity per se. So the consequentiality is a key factor in the determination of whether an act is free or not, in a sense.
So I just want to kind of regress back through this. We're thinking about this guy screaming in the Walmart, that he has some pathology, presumably like the dinosaur guy. That okay, that was caused, but it wasn't inevitable. But it was caused by material causes on him. But then I want to like walk back to where the non-inevitability of that comes from. Was it in when there was this novel historical development in the past that those guys were the only ones making the real choices, that they could decide, they could walk us down one path or the other, and in one he screams in the Walmart, in the other he doesn't?
Do you mean that, like, is the first guy who did that the one that established this as possible? Is that what you're saying?
Moreover, that whatever the previous novel historical development that put us on the
Mhm.
path towards this guy screaming in the Walmart, was that
Right.
the only time when there was possibility for actual free action? That's the only time when somebody was able to choose, and that's where the alternative comes in.
That was the only time that that specifically was possible, you're saying?
I'm
Like,
asking,
from that point on, that is what opened the threshold of possibility for antisocial acts like that.
open the possibility, right? But that's subtly different, right? It's not that it became
Okay.
possible for it widened
Yeah.
open the scope of choices and allowed people to choose to scream in
Yeah.
Walmarts. It's that
Okay, well,
it determined that there would be
yeah.
this guy with this pathology
Yeah.
20 years
I
down the
think
line who
I think the
has that pathology.
confusion arises when, I need to specify that, to me, passive acts very well are not necessarily, strictly determined as the only thing possible. That there is a threshold of passive affects upon the individual within any given society of different permutations of possible activity, which the assumption of which is more or less arbitrary. Like, for example, Pepsi versus Coca Cola. I don't consider that a free act. I consider it more or less arbitrary, right? Someone choosing to scream in a Walmart or dress as a dinosaur, I consider that relatively arbitrary. There's a kind of continuous and free transmission of possible acts that I think within any given society are received by individuals, and why they choose to do one or the other, or so on and so on. I think these are quite arbitrary, actually. I don't necessarily think they are strictly determined by one causal mechanism. Now, you could argue that maybe at the scale, at the site of that specific individual, there could be a causal mechanism. Maybe there's some specific mental illness that they have. Maybe there's some specific set of experiences, a specific psychological architecture that they're defined by because of their specific life. But from the perspective relevant to a Marxist, I think this is the important thing. It's not really all that important what the cause is, just that within the given threshold of material possibilities, it is possible.
Okay, so then if people arbitrarily choosing within some domain of possible actions, sure, sometimes it might be that the causal mechanism is that they're insane in some way and that they had no choice
Yeah,
over it. But then you're
right.
saying that it's not necessarily that it has that causal mechanism. So are there at least some times where there isn't a material causal mechanism and somebody did make a free choice, whether it even just be lifting up their arm or lowering it?
Well, I don't. I reject the dichotomy between a material cause and a free act. Again, the Marxist framework is that freedom is insight into necessity. So, actually, only an act which truly does reflect material reality in its active development, rather than as it has kind of crystallized or ossified into a given form of precedent possibilities, only that is truly free. That is our most fundamental relationship to reality in its active development, like reality as it really exists, or is in the process of becoming, right? So when you're talking about, is it possible that this wasn't caused by their specific psychology? I mean, we have to distinguish between the threshold of possible acts from the kind of consequential perspective of history, and the specific individual underlying causes, experiences, and so on, mechanisms for why someone chooses Pepsi over Coca-Cola, for example. There could very well be individual causes. I think that's a kind of psychological question, but that has to be distinguished from the causes of actions that are historically consequential, is really my main argument.
So could these individual causes for somebody picking Coke or Pepsi or choosing to scream, how loud to scream, so on and so
Right.
forth, could those individual causes themselves be mental causes, or must they be material causes?
Once again, I think that the uh, the distinction that you're drawing between mental causes and material causes is kind of like incoherent to me, or it's just not um It's not exactly like clear on what basis you're drawing the strict I don't believe there's mental causes of anything that exist in a vacuum. I don't think that the mental properly can be understood in isolation from the material. So when I think of the mental, I'm thinking about something that is relational, that's embedded in a context, that can only be referenced with respect to how it relates to things that are not mental. You seem to be talking about mental as this kind of like independent vacuum of just arbitrary thoughts and images that just, I don't know, come from outer space or something. And the material being like the actual embedded empirical or whatever reality. I just don't really agree with that distinction. I think that thought and mental activity can only be referenced with respect to the relationship it has to the practical world of like existing material existence.
Right, but then I don't see how we're not just in determinism. If there is no such thing as a mental cause, that is, something up in your mind causing you to
Hmm.
take some course of action, then there will only
Hmm.
be material causes, i.e., any thought you have must be caused by the material conditions. So then, how is that not just determinism? Where would the choice come in?
Well, the choice comes in from uh, the ability to, the choice is a consequence of, for whatever reason, we are kind of passive actors, for example. Let's just start with that as the premise that I'm working with. Let's say we're all passive actors, like even if we are talking about from a Marxist framework. Marx did not always exist, right? So at some point in his life, Marx was a passive actor who was just a kind of receptacle of the world that he lived in, right? It's upon the discovery of a specific alignment of thought and practice, a specific relationality of thought and practice, and the recognition of truth in that novel historical truth that embodies the kind of totality of social existence. And it's upon the kind of commitment to that truth, whether as a message or as a guide to practice or something like that, that freedom begins. So freedom begins with the commitment to the discovery of an actual relational alignment between thought and practice. Um, and that's what we Marxists would consider a free act. So, for example, I mean, in a kind of simplistic sense, you don't have to be religious, but it's like it's almost like in Christianity, right? When or religion, when a prophet discovers the truth, like when he receives the divine revelation, so to speak, that is the free act. That's the thing that's the kind of the free choice, so to speak, to insist upon that message, to disseminate that message, and so on and so on. Um, so freedom does not simply consist in the ability to um, do things that you think in your head, but freedom consists in the commitment to the relationship between thought and practice.
So
I would say.
I want to just clarify like one specific like semantic point um, before I ask my follow up. I'm suggesting that I could switch from free to chosen because it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, that when you're talking about a free act, that you have some specific understanding of what that means. That it's this recognition of a particular truth in these novel moments, and that's what free means. Whereas when I'm talking about
Mhm,
free, I mean chosen,
mhm.
right? That I'm specifically
Yeah.
choosing to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Well, I think I kind of take for granted the fact that we're quote unquote choosing to do things. You're choosing to debate me. I'm choosing to be here. There's all sorts of, you could qualify choices that we make. But for a choice to be free, it has to actually reflect a relationship between thought and practice that is without precedent and that doesn't simply conform to established conventions. Um, because those those kind of praxeological, I know Mysians took that term praxeological, but I'll use it in a Marxist sense. Those praxeological relationships that are embedded, that are based on conventions that simply reflect things people are either already doing or how society has already established as possible, those are not free acts in the Marxist view.
Okay, so I'm gonna proceed then with, and I'm gonna try and just only use the word chosen to like refer to this thing where I'm specifically choosing
Mhm.
option A rather than option B. Um, I want to know like, so are there actual chosen actions? Could I go about and choose something, or would my choice already be predetermined by the material conditions? Like, is it a true choice?
No, I think you can definitely choose Pepsi over Coke. I just think that that choice is a passive choice, not an active choice. In the strict, like, ultimate sense, I'm not here to, like, warp common sense language. I'm not saying that when you go to 7-Eleven, you're, like, in a state of non-consciousness, although you could kinda make the case for most people that but anyway, like, I'm not necessarily saying you could be like, "I really want Pepsi today. I'm gonna go to 7-Eleven and get Pepsi." Like, yeah, that's absolutely possible, but in the ultimate sense, like in a broader sense of what is a real choice, what is a free, like a real free act, that would still be a passive choice in the Marxist framework.
Okay, so and by passive choice, you mean like it's you're just reflecting the material conditions. That it's not a choice in the sense that I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you're just reflecting what has already been determined
Well, then how
as
are we not in
possible.
determinism?
Because the problem with determinism is that from the Marxist perspective, right? Um, Reality is dialectical. So determining causes cannot be fixed because reality itself is suspended in continuous development. So that would be the rejection of determinism from the Marxist perspective. And it's kind of why I'm hesitating to say, yes, this is simply determinism. Because like the determining object itself, so to speak, is not something fixed, or at least it's not something that we can uh, regard as fixed from the perspective of our thoughts or ideas.
Right, so I mean, I would accept that the material conditions on this view might be changing based on the dialectical process, but like the fact is that these material conditions are directly causing these choices, so that's why the choices are passive. So that I would
Well,
classify that as a type of determinism.
no, because you can choose Coke or Pepsi for any arbitrary reason you want. So, for example, you have the freedom when you're walking to 7-Eleven, you're committed to buying Pepsi, right? You can just randomly just say, I want Coke. And I would not be in a position to say there's directly, some identifiable cause that determined that, right? I think that from that perspective and at that scale, we would have to think about, okay, well, what thoughts are you having? What thoughts are coming into your mind? What memories are coming to you? So at that scale, if you're asking like, is the decisive thing primarily mental? Um, in isolation, you can't say that because, of course, your experiences of how they taste, and there's all sorts of reasons why you might be feeling the way you are. There's all sorts of reasons why you may even be doing this to prove a point, even right, which itself has to be evaluated in terms of causes. But like from a I'm not an unreasonable person who, like, from a colloquial standpoint, would be like, it would be wrong to say I just changed my mind, you know. But I just want to be clear that that doesn't mean that that like mental activity or the mental context is somehow vacuum sealed and independent.
Okay, but then so you're talking about these. We can look at the thoughts coming into your mind that it's that the choice of Coke or Pepsi in this 7-Eleven, that it isn't determined by material conditions. Like, does that not mean that there is no material cause here, and therefore that thoughts can cause actions?
Again, I don't really think you're following what I'm saying. I think that at the scale of what I would consider something arbitrary, for example, Pepsi or Coke, it would not be wrong colloquially to be like, yeah, I just changed my mind. I wanted Pepsi or Coke, right? But that doesn't mean that the underlying cause of your act is mental, because you can't isolate the act in the first place. If you want to actually like comprehend this from, like, I don't know, an ontological or whatever perspective, technically speaking, you have to situate acts within pre-established conditions of possibility and like a wider, totality of labor and society and so on and so on. And most people don't think at that scale, which is why obviously people can be forgiven for saying, "Yeah, I just changed my mind. That was the cause." But if you're wanting to think about causes on this like deeper level that you're implying, then I would say things can be simultaneously caused by a given material threshold of possibility, and there can also be a threshold of arbitrariness with respect to, Pepsi or Coke, because, for example, I mean, this is a crude argument, but even in the case of ants who are predetermined maybe biologically or naturally, which I'm not saying human beings are, there's still like room for arbitrariness with respect to outcomes. It's not always actually exact. Why? Because there's a confluence of so many different factors, that ultimately influence it. And if you want to go down the path, I mean, we could even go to like modern physics, where things get even more messy with respect to the question of, determinism, where like only retroactively we can say things are determined. Um,
Okay, I want to get outside of the colloquial, because I want to
okay.
really understand if there is a substantive disagreement here. Because you're, on the one hand, you're saying that, there is this material, like, parameters of action, I'll say,
hmm
that within what you could possibly, like, imagine, and so on and so forth, right?
hmm
But then there is some threshold of arbitrariness, which is what I'm taking to mean, like, the
Yeah.
actual choices in the sense I'm thinking. Now, are you just saying that in the colloquial sense, or are you making like an actual like metaphysical claim that there truly is a choice here? It's not just passive. Like there's an actual active mind causing action.
Well, to put it simply, there is in the employment of a faculty, which very much is decisive for the participation or the partaking in a free act, that is being employed to simply be a passive receptacle of some established convention or a threshold of possibility.
So it is
So
passive.
so like the same, maybe somebody, yeah, it's still ultimately passive because of the act itself is passive. Now, because again, thought and practice is a relationship. It can't be understood. You can't understand thought, from my view, outside of the context of how it relates to practice.
Okay,
So the
if
same. Let me to say something kind of outrageous. The same audacity that we do have to insist, I want Pepsi rather than Coke. You can even like make a comedy out of it, like somebody who's literally willing to like destroy the world for a cup of Pepsi or something. Right? He really is adamant and fix. That is very possible. That's the same audacity that makes it possible to partake in free acts. So there's no disagreement with respect to like the faculty being employed here being one of will, but the act itself ultimately amounts to being a passive receptacle of, some pre-existing threshold of possibility or cause, and therefore not free. Like, we human beings have the active capacity in some sense to be passive subjects. We can actively reinforce our passivity in slavery. A slave can actively maintain their position, and actually necessarily does maintain their slavery
well, hold on, necessary does maintain their
actively.
slavery. Wouldn't that mean that there isn't an active choice if they're necessarily going to do this?
No, I'm not saying they're necessarily going to that. I'm saying for slavery to be possible, people have to, at some level and in
I see.
some
I see.
sense, like in ancient Rome or something, they have to actively reinforce that condition themselves in some way.
Okay, even if like unintentionally, like they just are
Absolutely, yeah.
accepting.
Even
Okay,
whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think most of the time it's unintentional for sure.
okay. Like,
But
if this like Pepsi or Coke choice, if it is indeed
mhm,
ultimately passive, then it
mhm.
strikes me that we are still in determinism. If there is no true active choice, then how are we not in determinism?
Well, we're not in determinism because that we can be like that we can engage in passive acts doesn't necessarily mean that every act is passive in that same strict sense. So I would say that a historically remarkable act or historically remarkable figure or something, when they actually like commit to a novel, event, a novel kind of uh, articulation of the relationship of thought and practice for a historical era, they are. You could now, in the one sense, you could say, is that determinism because it's ultimately being determined by something?
Hmm.
Maybe, but that something is not pre-established in the same way that the choice between Pepsi and Coke is. And that's the key distinction I would insist
What
upon.
do you mean by
Maybe you could say
pre-established?
ultimately it's predetermined, but the thing that is determining is not itself established in the way that the quote unquote choice of Pepsi or Coke is.
And the thing which is predetermining, that would be the material conditions, right?
Yeah, well, it would be in the case of like the historically free act, it would be the material condition, right? It would be material condition, not simply as like a confluence of different factors, but like the integral totality of humanity in the form of history affecting someone directly, right? And in religious terms, religious theology or history would regard that as like the direct relation of a prophet to God, for example, right?
And would you say that the material conditions at any given point are coming about from the dialectic?
I don't exactly understand that question, because dialectics is not something that Marxists regard as separate from material conditions. Marxists regard the material world to itself be dialectical.
I'm more meaning like
Dialectics, yeah.
that there is some contradictions in feudalism, which then those contradictions give you the synthesis of capitalism. Sorry,
Mhm.
I don't know my Marxist history too well, but then
Yeah,
there's contradictions in capitalism, which give you communism, and that's like the final state. That's my vague understanding of it, of like how the Marxists see dialectical
right.
materialism, right? And so the material
Yeah.
conditions of like feudalism versus capitalism versus communism, they would be coming about based on the dialectic process, no?
Um, so your question is the emergence of communism a consequence of dialectical processes? I would say yes. I don't exactly understand your question beyond that.
Okay, so but then, so the thing which is doing the predetermining of like
Mhm.
actions is the material
Mhm.
conditions, and the material conditions at any given point in history are themselves they had to come about based on the dialectic process. So it seems to me just total determinism.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying material conditions are the cause, and the cause of the material conditions is some underlying dialectical process. So it's like this chain
Mm,
of determinism. From at the starting point, you have like a free act under my definition. Below that, material conditions, and then below that, the dialectical process. Is that what you're trying to say?
yeah.
Yeah, I would say that gets the confusion arises because you're ordering the things differently, right? I would say that the dialectical process in question first is a relationship, right? With of like you want to get into technical uh dialectics of nature sense, like originally the material relation of matter with respect to itself that culminates in the development of thinking beings or consciousness or something, right? But in any case, the causal mechanism doesn't come from behind, but it comes from the front, so to speak, right? It's not that there's this already established um material cause that like you can identify with feudalism. The jury is still out, so to speak, as far as what feudalism actually is. Only from the perspective of feudalism being superseded can we identify a distinct epoch called the feudal epoch. But during the feudal epoch, the jury is still out as far as, well, what is this mode of production? How can we define the material conditions, right? And we can only really understand feudalism from the perspective of capitalism itself, right? And in that sense, you know, the causal mechanism isn't happening because of you can understand dialectics is our kind of understanding of the principle behind governing the development of matter, right? And the way that a free act dialectically participates in the transformation of history is that the entire integral totality of a given historical era or epoch or mode of production is articulated in a way directly to the thinking consciousness, for example, right? So, the crudest example of this would be Marx proceeding with the writing of Capital itself, like directly understanding the mode of production he's living in. But I think that all historically novel developments take on this structure, even if it's not in the form of a direct knowledge. The key thing is that it's an effective relationship.
So the upshot of all that, like I'm not gonna necessarily try and argue about what the correct ordering is or anything. I'll leave that to you guys on what the correct relationship between dialectics and material conditions and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. But the upshot of it, as far as I'm concerned, is that there would be no truly active choices. That any choice you make, ultimately, if you looked at it hard enough, it came from some material cause or causes, right?
But that's only relevant to us after the fact. That's the key thing. Like, we can't rest upon the identification of some material cause or, some underlying cause in general in order to justify an act.
But it is true, though, right, that it ultimately does come down to that there are no active choices. That ultimately comes down to material cause or causes.
Ultimately, yes, but the point is there is free choice because freedom is precisely identical with the insight we have into necessity. So the very possibility that we as human beings can have insight into our material causes and material necessities is what makes us free. It's what gives us the so-called, it's what not gives us, it's what we can say justifies the attribution of free will to human beings. And it's what gives humanity distinction with respect to other beings, right, from the Marxist perspective, because human beings are the only beings that actually have self-relationality, right?
So every man, then, ultimately, is predetermined to believe whatever the hell he's going to believe. And,
No, not at all.
okay, um, but there are no choices. Like, your thoughts are going to be predetermined. Like, that's what you said.
um like, for example, we can't say that that there's no choice in terms of the determination of your thoughts or your actions. All we can do is identify what the choices people make actually amount to and actually are,
Passive, right?
essentially. Yeah.
Right. So then there are no true active choices. So whatever I believe, I'm going to believe.
Put it this way, part of the definition of man is a being which actively attends to and reproduces its own existence, right? So, like, if we're defining man as a specific being in that way, the paradox would then be is there no freedom then? Because ultimately, whatever man does, it's ultimately going to be determined by the fact that he is man, that he is a being that is defined by self relationality. I think that that's not a real paradox necessarily. I think that we just have to change our understanding of like free will versus determinism in the first place, which I think is a distinction that is in the first place built upon faulty foundations.
Well, I mean, there's certainly no paradox yet. All I'm trying to get down is that given there
No,
are
I mean there
only
kind of is
truly
though, because
given well, I think there will be I think there will be a problem for you coming up. But given
okay.
that there are no truly like mental causes, I can't ever actively choose what I'm going to do. It's just going to be a reflection of the material causes. Wait, all mental activity that applies to it all, right? So then how I'm just going to believe whatever the hell I believe, right? I wouldn't ever have a choice over that.
No, because you're defining choice in a very narrow sense. You're defining choice as
Yes.
simply like a completely sovereign act of the individual. I don't define choice in that way.
Well, how I gave you the definition of free. How about we go with me on choice?
Well, I mean,
There's a
that's a
tit for
very
tat there, you
generous
know.
exchange. It's a very generous exchange, but I see no reason to exchange the definition of our
Well,
concepts because they're just different.
well, the problem is if we can't actually talk, then
Right.
then we can't proceed, right? I need to be able to
Well, no, we
communicate
can.
what
We you
I
can.
think you know what I mean by choice, right?
No, I absolutely do, but I'm trying to kind of challenge that notion of choice, or at least explain why mine is distinct, right? And then once we understand what I mean by choice and what you mean by choice, we can compare them and see which one is better than the other. But in the first place, I don't have a notion of choice according to which a choice is simply, an act by a completely self-sovereign kind of subject.
Well, so
I think that a choice is a relationship, first of all.
sure. So it might be that your definition of choice is way better than my definition of choice. But I'm just saying, whatever you want to call what I would mean by choice, whatever you would want to call that, there is no, on your worldview, there is no such thing as it, right?
Okay, let me ask to help clarify this. Let's say we say that something like extremely tautological and simple. Humans are human, right? And then let's define human as a human being is a being with free choice. Not necessarily the best definition, but like for the purposes of like this vacuum sealed logical procedure, so to speak, right? And then wouldn't it be paradoxical for us to say that a human is determined by its humanness? So what is the relation of free will to determinism in that case? Do you understand the kind of issue here? Like, does that mean we're saying that there is, in fact, no free will because human beings do not have the freedom to reject the free will that defines them, and they're ultimately going to be determined by that? Do
Well,
you understand what I'm
well,
saying at all, or no?
under that definition of determined, then
Yeah.
compatibilism, I think, would be correct, right? Sure, definitely. But then I just really want to get down to this. Under what everybody understands, I mean by choice, you would have to contend that there is no such thing, right? Or do you think that there is such a thing as what I would mean by choice?
Well, if what you mean by choice is not colloquial, but in the strict sense means a completely self-sovereign act that is not necessarily relational, but simply and only derives from the individual subject, absolutely, I would say there's no free choice.
Okay, brilliant. So if there are no choices as far as I would mean choice, as far as,
Yeah.
non-communists would mean choice, at least generally
Mhm.
speaking. I'm sure there's all sorts of crazy
Well, no,
theories
you
out there.
said we're not talking. I don't think that all non-communists share your
Sure,
view
sure,
of what
sure, sure,
choice
sure.
is.
I
Yeah.
won't say that. At least as far as, somebody like me would think, an objectivist,
Yeah, yeah.
or some sort of
Mhm.
Aristotelian. Um,
Right.
as far as what we would mean by choice,
Let's just say objectivist to
sure.
prevent. Yeah.
Then there is no such thing as what I mean by choice. So then,
Mhm.
by what I mean by choice, I would have no choice over what I believe. So I'm just going to believe whatever I end up believing. I have no choice in the matter, right?
Well, I think you're stumbling upon the inherent limitations of your understanding of what choice is.
But would that follow? Like I wouldn't be able to choose to believe one thing or another.
If you were correct about what a choice is, yes, but I don't think you are, and hence the contradiction or paradox.
Well, no. It's not even that I have to be correct about what choice is, right? It's that there
Mhm.
isn't. You're contending that there is no such thing
Like,
as what I
you're
would mean
basically
by
asking me,
choice.
like, in my imagination, would it follow based on these premises you regard as invalid that I have no choices? And I would say, yes, but I don't accept your premises. Therefore, I'm not responsible for the conclusion you're drawing.
Well, no, you don't even have to agree. Like, actually, I'm in my premises. You're explicitly disagreeing that there is such a thing as
Right.
what I'm calling choice, and so therefore,
Well, what I'm specifically
let's say that
yeah,
I agree that there is no such thing as what I'm calling choice, right?
right.
Then that would mean
So,
that there is no alternative as far as what I believe.
but does that mean you accept my understanding of choice?
Sure, yeah.
Because
Let's say
yeah,
that I do
yeah.
for the
Okay,
purposes of moving
just to be clear,
forward.
okay, that
For the
clarifies everything. Yeah, so you accept my
hold on,
understanding of choice, but
for the
yeah, yeah.
purposes of moving forward.
Yeah, for the purposes of the argument, you accept my understanding of choice, and now you're asking me, okay, Haz, if I accept your understanding of choice, then how then can I have what
No,
exactly?
I'm saying how then. So then, therefore, would there not be zero alternatives as far as what I believe? I would have always ended up believing exactly what I believe right now. I would
No,
have
no,
always had the exact
absolutely
same
not.
amount of. So there are alternatives. Where do those alternatives come from?
Well, no, because that question itself connotes a new relationality, which is the question of
But are
a
there
degree of
alternatives?
respon a degree of responsibility for the position you have. Keep in mind, most people at a given moment do not articulate the various passive choices they make in terms of like, okay, what is the underlying responsibility or commitment do I have to the relationship of my thoughts to practice, right? So for you to partake in that very question is opening a new can of worms, so to speak. And you couldn't say, well, I'm just going to believe whatever I'm going to believe and there's no alternative.
But
You would
are
be
there
confronted
alternatives?
to what you believe.
Yeah, is it
Of
possible that I
course,
could have believed other things?
absolutely.
Okay, so where does that alternative
Uh,
come from?
the alternative ultimately comes from the fact that there is a contradiction between the given threshold or horizon of existing established possibilities of permutations of activity, right? And the properly free act as understood within the Marxist framework, right? And it's that very contradiction that,
So
to
that
put it
contradiction
simply, like
could
we
resolve in
are
different ways.
wasting, in some sense, we waste the faculty of free will that we have. Um, and that waste is absolutely possible to waste it in various different kinds of ways, like jumping from one thing to another, and so on and so on and so on. It's like it's almost like there's two key components of the relationship that defines a free act, right? Which is the kind of historically novel consequence of the unprecedented, right?
And
And
with
the ability to actually have a will in the first place. Now you can have a will without the second component, absolutely, but the second component is necessary for something to qualify as a free act in my framework. So you can
right, so
express your
I'm
will
not
of
asking about
choosing.
what a free act
Mhm.
is, to be clear. Like
Okay.
sure, I will cede your definition of free, and I'm not going to use it. I'm saying that as far as you're concerned, how could there ever be alternatives in what I believe?
Um. So how could why or how
How
or
could
why?
for instance, if everything was the same up until now,
Mhm.
could I have been born and then grown up to be a communist in this moment? Would that
Right.
have been possible to me?
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're asking. Like whether you're a communist or some other kind of like ideology, maybe even like a fascist or something. Like,
Mhm. Even
why
even
is
whether
it
like I love
possible?
my mother, could there be alternatives there, or whether I like the taste of chocolate ice cream, so on and so forth. They've
Yeah,
all mental contents.
yeah, for certain. And the alternatives are a consequence of the fact that we're talking about a threshold of possibility that is materially established. So yes, there's alternatives within that
How
threshold
would
for
those
certain.
alternatives come about, though, specifically?
Like what would be the mechanism? What would be the conditions of them coming about?
Yeah,
Well, in the case, I mean, it could be a confluence of many different factors, with respect to, I mean, I don't want to get into the personal thing, but for example, maybe if you at a certain age were exposed to, a communist argument
how
and
would I
you
be?
decided to commit to it and was compelled by it, or
But I couldn't
maybe, I mean,
choose to be seek this out. Like, how would I end up
but,
getting exposed to that argument if I never did get exposed to that argument? Like, could somebody choose to
well, no,
go,
I
I
think
reckon he'd be a
that,
good
but that's the,
communist someday?
but I
No, they
think
can't
that's the
choose,
key,
right?
the key distinction that we're touching upon here is the fact that most of the choices we make are passive. Okay, we are
Well, no, not
passive
most,
subjects.
all, right?
Well, none up to no, not necessarily all. So, for example, I use
We
the
already got
argument of
through this.
Marx. Even within a Marxist argument, we have to concede that at a certain point, you know, Marx was like a passive subject. Remember when I said that, right? And that at a certain point, there's a decisive act that is defined by a commitment to the relation of thought and practice in a specific way,
Right, but
right?
that isn't chosen in the sense that I mean.
The free act is the only choice you could possibly make, basically.
Right, the only
The
possible choice
real
you can make. So
choice.
there aren't alternatives there, right? So that's not where the alternatives are. So where are the alternatives found in terms of what I believe, whether I'm a communist or a capitalist?
So I don't know if you're asking like, okay, so there's like basically like in my view, basically, there's this kind of like truth or falsehood, right? And you're saying, well, falsehood, there's many different forms of falsehood. So why is that? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking where the alternatives could possibly come in, whether I end up becoming a communist or a capitalist in this moment. Because it's not in the free act, because you said the free act isn't chosen in my sense. It had to happen. right? So then where did the alternatives come from? There are no alternatives as far as that free act is concerned. So where did the alternatives come from?
The alternatives preceding the free act, you're saying?
Whatever alternatives, there has to be some alternatives in the past which led to me either going down the branch of me becoming a communist or me becoming a capitalist.
But
so
I
what is
think
the
from
mechanism by which you can get this
from-
alternative?
yeah, but from the perspective of okay, I'll explain it this way. From a perspective of a free act, all of the other alternatives are the same. Are we not in is there confusion about that or no?
Okay, so, yeah, there is. So all the alternatives are
Okay.
the same.
Yeah.
So then me being a communist and me being a capitalist are the same.
No, like
Okay, so they're not all the
being a
same.
capitalist or a fascist or something, like all that's the same, and the only decisive thing is being a communist within this framework. Like that's the only decisive free act.
Okay, I don't care whether or not my alternative is decisive or not in terms of the flow of history.
Yeah.
I'm caring about whether or not I could have possibly believed in communism in this moment.
So you're basically asking like, why is it possible to not be a communist? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm asking in this moment, could I have ended up being a communist already?
You can end up being a communist right now.
No. Could I have already conceded half an hour ago? Would that have been possible?
It's not plausible, but maybe it's possible. I don't know.
How would it be possible? So there would have been some alternative. Let's say I watched some of your stuff earlier, right? Maybe I got convinced.
Understand. Yeah, I'm just trying to simplify your argument because I'm trying to understand what you're asking. Are you saying how is it possible to transition from being a passive subject who's just engaging in a bunch of passive acts?
I'm not asking
to an active subject. Is that what you're asking?
No.
How is that transition possible?
I'm asking in this moment, how are there alternatives? Would I have always been a capitalist in this second? Or could something have gone different in the past that would have made me be a communist in the second? Or a fascist in this second? Or a Zionist in the second? Any other alternative?
No, yeah. All sorts of things could have happened. Why not?
How?
I mean,
what is the mechanism of that?
Physics. What do you mean?
What is the mechanism of that? Because it's not from the free acts. Because you said the free acts, there are no alternatives there. It's not in my choices because I don't have choices. So where is it coming from?
Yeah, but the premise of the free act is not itself the free act. That's why it's an act, right? Everyone begins as a passive subject. Everyone. And the things that lead you. So the communists would basically say that communism is this kind of today. It's this kind of underlying logos, right, of our reality, right? This underlying riddle of history solved. It's the truth of all of history, and so on and so on. And how far along you're capable of going with respect to the uncovering of that truth or the final discovery of that truth could be based on a whole host of arbitrary factors. In this sense, you could even represent it as a bunch of billiard balls smashing together on a pool table or something, right? Or
and there would be alternatives there, yet, then, right? No alternatives as far as billiard balls are concerned, right?
What do you mean?
There wouldn't be alternatives, right? It couldn't have gone. It wouldn't be possible for it to go one way or the other.
You can throw a bunch of marbles on the ground, and each marble or its trajectory could represent a different alternative for the purposes of this argument, right?
Oh, so it could have been that the marbles spread out in a different pattern given the same throwing.
But it's almost like it's a matter of probability that eventually at least one marble is going to escape the confines of the place where the marbles are thrown.
Okay, so it might be that we're very probable.
All that is necessary is to be accidentally struck by lightning one time, and then you can know what an act is. You can partake in a free act. And actually, within the religious tradition, it's like Saint Paul was electrocuted on the road to Damascus, right? So it's basically like.
So it might be 99% probable that we ended up on this path where I'm a capitalist right now. But there is that 1% that I didn't, let's say, for argument's sake. So what is the mechanism for that alternative path? How could that alternative path have ever come about?
If you, for example, shared the same set of life experiences as a communist, maybe could have been drawn more to the communist message.
Could I have?
What's that?
Could I have shared those same life experiences?
No, you couldn't have.
Okay, so that's not where the alternative is. So where is the alternative?
But now that we're actively confronting the object in an active capacity, you can't fall upon the precedent of all the experiences and things you've had in the past to justify your current position. It's
I'm not
not like a
justifying my
cop out.
current position at all. I'm
No, I
asking
know.
just
I'm just
where
saying
where
it's
the
not really
alternative is.
relevant. It's not really relevant. Once the question is raised to an object of active discourse, the things that brought us here are no longer relevant anymore. Now we have to
Well,
commit
it's relevant to
ourselves.
me, and it's relevant to the argument you made. You said that there were possible alternatives, that I could have been a communist right now. So what is the mechanism for that alternative?
Okay, so um, you're saying what are the conditions of you being convinced to be a communist right now in this debate?
I'm asking, could it have been possible for me to have been a communist already up to this point?
Um, Possible according to what standard? According to what is possible within our society?
According to the
Absolutely,
standard
yes.
of dialectical materialism. Could dialectical
According
materialism
to what?
possibly have spat out that I end up a communist?
Okay, according to what society has established as possible, absolutely, you could have been. But
So there are alternatives
alternatives to what?
to the current world we're in. There are alternatives that we could have already been in.
I feel like this is like such like a physics question or something. Like, what are we talking about?
It's not a physics question; it's a metaphysics question.
Worlds? What do you mean? Like, is this like an alternate history question? I don't really know like what you're getting at.
Basically, yeah. Could history have gone a different way? Because I would say that history could have gone a different way if people made different choices. But you reject that. But you're still saying that history could have gone a different way. So then, where is the mechanism by which you could explain these alternatives? My mechanism is free will. What is your mechanism?
So, could history have gone a different way in the sense of, like, could the marble, so to speak, have escaped the confines of where all the marbles were thrown? Like, I feel like that's kind of almost like you're touching on a physics question, right?
No. I'm touching on the question of whether it could have been that my parents were communists and then they raised me as a communist. Could that have ever happened?
I don't like, what do you mean? Could your parents have been a communist? And clearly they weren't, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So what is the like value of the question, so to speak? What's the meaningfulness of the question that you're asking? Like, could it have been possible that you were born, in America? Could it have been possible that you were born on the moon or something? Like, I mean, what are you asking here?
So what I'm getting at is that you've basically got two choices in front of you. Choices, huh? See? Either you're going to be committed to determinism, in which case there are no choices, so people are just going to believe whatever the hell they believe, and I have problems with that. Or there are choices, in which case we're not in determinism, and history could have gone different ways, so then the dialectic process doesn't determine history. Either way, you're in a problem.
Yeah. We can only evaluate the content of the choices people have made once we have actually committed a free act.
Okay.
That's my central point here. There's no framework within which we can evaluate the content of all the various arbitrary choices people make until we have actually partaken in the free act, right, of committing.
So I'm not asking you to evaluate what happened in history. I'm asking you to provide me the mechanism by which history could have gone a different way and I could have ended up a communist.
I mean, but you're not satisfied with, for example, if I told you, well, maybe you, for some reason, were pushed down the stairs one day, and
for some reason, could that have happened? I would be satisfied with that if you could explain how, for some reason, it would have been possible for me to get pushed down the stairs where I otherwise wouldn't have.
It's like a physics question. Like, let's say the wind was blowing really hard in one direction.
Could it have blown really hard a different way?
What?
Could it have blown hard when it didn't blow hard?
That's a physics question, right? I mean,
that's what I'm asking you.
Could natural physical outcomes have been different 100 years ago? Like, could a volcano have not erupted versus? What does that have to do with choice?
Well, I'm looking for alternatives.
I'm ultimately trying to say, like, there could be arbitrary factors such as the wind blowing really hard in a direction, you falling down the stairs, stumbling upon, I don't know, like an album of the Red Army Choir and then taking it home and being really inspired by it and then like becoming a communist when you were like 12 years old. Could that have happened? I mean, from the existing threshold of what has been established as possible, yes. But could it have happened in the sense like from the perspective of necessity as it's established now, we're talking about a time machine. We're talking about nonsense. We're talking about something that would be based on like a confluence of arbitrary factors, right?
Right. But I just want the upshot here. Could the wind have blown in a certain way, which then caused me to be a communist? Could that have happened? When it didn't happen?
Could the wind have been different than it was, or are you asking like could I have been influenced by arbitrary factors to the point where I could have been brought to the communist position?
Which
one are you asking?
So it depends on what I'm not prescribing upon you any mechanism by which the the alternatives come about from, right? It might be on your view that the alternatives come about from the forces of physics. It's like, okay, if that is the case, how could that have happened?
It's things that may as well be as arbitrary as the forces of physics. Like, I don't think
but what specifically are they then? If you're just making a metaphor with physics, what specifically are they?
You are so necessarily unique that there's something like fundamentally in a way that's meaningful and relevant and important from a Marxist perspective about like how you got on the ANCAP pipeline versus how someone else, maybe in your town or across the other side of the world was put on some like fascist or something Mussolini pipeline. Like, I ultimately don't think I think that the reasons are arbitrary. Those alternatives, if we understood those as alternative pipelines and positions, they're quite arbitrarily influenced by a confluence of non-historically relevant factors. The historically relevant thing is the threshold of established possibility, not necessarily whether you personally are going to go down this pipeline versus someone else personally going down another pipeline.
Okay, all I want to get down to, though, is I'm not prescribing upon you that you have to use some specific mechanism for how you explain alternatives. I want to know, because you are asserting that there can be alternatives, that I could have potentially been a communist, right? So what is that mechanism? Because for me, the mechanism to describe these alternatives is called free will, right? And that's how I can get to alternatives. But how do you get to it?
Well, I tried to explain it to you, but why don't you elaborate about like what about my response is not satisfactory?
Well, to be honest with you, I think you're just kind of evading here. You're just trying to go down a bunch of random paths and see what sticks on the wall.
I don't understand like what you mean by that. I'm like, I think that people are drawn to the ideologies and political positions that they have for quite
exactly. So that doesn't explain. That doesn't explain how there are alternatives. This is what I'm talking about. Every time I try and dig you down for how do you explain alternatives, you either go into like, oh, the free action, but there are no alternatives there. It's like, okay, so that's not where the alternatives are. It's, oh, they're drawn to it for different reasons. Okay, so that's not where the alternatives are. Where are they?
Where are all the alternatives between what? You're not being
between me being a capitalist or me being a communist.
Okay,
how did we get down this path rather than the other?
How is it possible that you could like basically be like what I would call a conformist versus someone who adopts like a revolutionary position? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking, could I have gone down the different path?
Maybe you could have. What's the relevance of the question?
How could I have?
Again, I think that the pipeline to getting there is very different from the justification you could then post hoc understand or see. The getting there part is not the same thing as the active process of understanding. Those are distinct things.
Okay, so you didn't answer my question.
What puts you okay, I'm trying though. I'm literally trying. Like what puts you on a communist pipeline is not necessarily the same thing as the free act itself of being a communist and understanding. Okay, you don't care about this answer. So like what are you asking?
I'm asking, how could I have ended up on the revolutionary pipeline as against the capitalist pipeline? How could I have?
But I told you it could have been something as arbitrary as like a gust of wind.
Could that have happened differently?
Could the wind have been different?
Yeah,
how would I know? How would I know if the wind could have been different, like 20 years ago or something? Like, how would I know that?
So,
what's the material meaningfulness or relevance of that question?
So to be clear, you don't know how to explain alternatives on your worldview.
You're asking like, could I have become a communist?
Yeah.
I think that what puts people on that pipeline are quite arbitrary to this, in the sense that like, I think like let's say you like have a bunch of like teenagers like I don't know getting into political subcultures. I think at a certain starting point level, it's quite arbitrary what they're going to choose, right?
Okay, and so where
And
are the
but I
alternatives?
think that the communist position, like other, it's like a pipeline, right? You keep going forward and forward and
Okay,
forward,
cool.
immersing yourself in a subculture, immersing yourself into the commitment to a specific relationship of thought and practice, and that is like that is very much in the beginning arbitrary. What makes or breaks the distinction, so to speak, of like what is a true alternative is the level of commitment you have to the relation of thought and practice.
Could I have had a different level of commitment then?
Yeah.
How?
You could have actually like committed to a relationship between thought and practice
I could have
that
chosen to
actually
do that?
you could have yes, you could have chosen,
So
yes.
there are choices. We got free will back.
But I never denied free will or
Okay, so
choices.
we've
I
got
said
free
that I
will. Are we going to stick with free will for now?
hold on, Zulu. I mean, like, it's quite dishonest that you're claiming I deny choice when all I did is deny your definition of choice, which is an act by an entirely, completely self-sovereign subject who just does things in a vacuum in isolation from the relational object, right?
Right,
I
I'm
never
sorry.
denied
When you
choices are
say
possible.
choice, you
I
mean
never
that it's not
denied
actually
free will.
choice. That it was always going to
It's
happen.
not choice. Hold on. What happened to, if we go earlier in the debate, you said, I'm not working with a colloquial definition of choice. I'm working strictly with my definition of choice, which is an act committed by a completely self-sovereign subject. If you understand my explication of how it's possible you could go down like the pipeline of different political ideologies, we very much aren't dealing with a completely self-sovereign subject. We're dealing with a passive subject who's simply a
Right, so they
receptacle
don't have
of a
choices. They're simply a
confluence,
receptacle.
a receptacle of a confluence of factors, which they themselves in no way have sovereignty or control over, right? So,
Right, so
like
where are the
even within
alternatives
the
coming from?
framework that you yourself have entertained, as far as like what is a choice or not, you're basically conceding, and you did for the purposes of argument concede from the very beginning that you're going to work with my understanding of choice.
Sure,
So I don't know
so,
why you're confused. Like I
so
feel like you lost
okay,
track
okay,
of where we
so
have gotten so far.
I don't think I have. Okay, so given your understanding of choice, that there are no, true choices, whatever you want to say.
No, I hold on. To
Not
be
even
very
to say,
clear,
okay,
to be very
sure.
clear.
I'm just going to completely
Yeah.
accede to you, whatever you think choice means. Okay, now teach
Okay.
me on dialectics. Brax Ben did this in your debate. You're going to be the teacher for a second. Teach me, sensei, where does the alternatives come from? Where on one branch I could have been a communist right now, and on the other branch I am currently a capitalist. What is the mechanism for these to be two possible alternatives?
Okay. So, I did try to explain that, but you just kind of like kept on interrupting me, and you like really weren't satisfied with the line of explication I was developing. So it's like I think you need to be like more clear about what the question you're asking is, because I already explained. I think that a given historical epoch or mode of production produces a given threshold of possible choices people can partake in, the possible conventions people can mimic, a threshold of like materially possible relationships between thought and practice, right? And that for the purposes and from the perspective of a truly radically free choice, these are quite arbitrary, right?
And
And
there
they're
are
not
no
actually
alternatives
like,
as far as the free choice is concerned.
are there alternatives to the free choice committed within my framework of a revolutionary?
Yeah, earlier you said no.
Yeah, but I'm saying no, hold on. I'm saying, can you choose to not make a choice? Is that what you're
No.
asking?
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking very simply, what is your mechanism for there to be alternatives? That on one branch, it's just alternative history. I could say like, oh, what if the US didn't gain independence in 1776? I could explain that and analyze this alternative history, by saying that they made different choices. They had poorer generals, right? That the generals made worse decisions. I could analyze that as an alternative history. I'm asking you to analyze as an alternative history how it could have possibly been that I ended up as a communist already.
Okay, once again, I think that there is a given threshold of possible choices people can make, which there is an active faculty of will that is involved for certain, right? But because it doesn't participate in the development of history in a novel sense, or the threshold of possibility, advancing that in any kind of sense, it is a kind of the usage of free will, so to speak, to perpetuate and reinforce an ultimately passive practical position in existence. So it's a passive choice, so to speak, right? And this is my definition of what a passive
Passive
choice would
choice,
be. Like
yes.
choosing Pepsi very strongly and whatever with all your willpower over Coca-Cola. Very much possible, right?
Right, so
And I don't. What is materially different about this argument versus the Pepsi versus Coca-Cola question? Like that's what I really want to know. Like, could I have chosen Pepsi versus Coke? Is that what you're asking? Because I feel like you've
yeah,
complicated your question way
sure,
too
sure, sure. We,
much.
we can make it much more simple, right? If I'm in the shops and I see in
Hmm.
front of me either Pepsi or Coke, could I
Hmm.
have got, are there alternatives available? Will I always end up choosing Coke, or will I always end up choosing Pepsi, or could I have gone either way?
You could say that it could go either way in some
It could
in
go
the
either way, so
sense
there
that
are
like.
alternatives.
But didn't I already establish that you can like the free will meme, you can run in Walmart and scream? Like, what is new about this question you're asking? Like, I feel like we already treaded this
Right, we
ground
tread that ground,
before.
and then you conceded that there were no choices there. That you're going to be determined to end up
No,
screaming
no,
in
no.
that
Hold on,
free
hold on,
in
hold
that
on.
Walmart.
I would say it's not a true free choice, but can the
Right, because of your
outcome be
definition of
different?
free. When I'm saying
Hold
free,
on,
I'm
hold
meaning a
on, hold
different
on.
thing.
Hold on? Am I denying that the outcome of choosing Pepsi is impossible? That could be different? No, I'm not denying that. The outcome
Okay, so what is the
between
mechanism
Pepsi
for
and
that?
Coke could be different, but it's not materially distinct. It's of no material difference. That's my
Right,
point.
I
It is
get
not
that.
of any material consequential difference.
I 100% get that you're not denying
Okay.
that that there was a possible alternative where I went Pepsi instead of Coke. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. I'm asking you, what possible mechanism do you have on your dialectical materialist metaphysics? What mechanism do
Mhm.
you have to explain how there could be an alternative there?
Okay. At the beginning of this debate, when you asked me if I believed in free will, what did I say?
Well, you've said many different things on that. So
Okay, but
there are
you asked
different
me if I believed in
contradictions
free will.
in the flow.
You
That's why we're looping here.
you asked me if I believed in free will. So what did I say?
You're going to have to tell me because you've said multiple things at different points.
Okay. Well, I'll let everyone go back to the beginning and see
Okay.
what I said when you asked me if I believed in free will. Okay. We have the faculty to engage in free acts. That doesn't mean we employ that faculty in a way that consequentially is, in fact, a free act. We have the faculty, and the faculty is what gives us the illusion of the freedom that the outcome of choice or Pepsi is truly a choice. But we haven't really affected a choice into reality until there's that second component of actually committing to a novel relationship between thought and practice that is not simply conforming passively to pre-established conventions and practices.
So I understand that I've reached the bottom of your like call center script here, but I'm gonna have to really ask you to try and go off script for a second and just try
Okay.
and reach
I
into your
think I've been
mind
saying
and
this like
explain
staring at the camera. Okay, but
where the
people can see
alternatives can
that I've
come
been
from.
but people have been seeing I've been like saying this while staring at the camera, so I don't know what script I
Okay.
could possibly be reading off.
Oh, you can memorize a script. Don't you worry. People do it all the time in
Okay.
debates. You're doing it right now.
So I kind of feel like you're copping out from the content of my argument by claiming that I'm reading a
You're
script.
looping, bro. You're fucking looping.
I feel like you're getting a little upset and frustrated
Is that
right
so?
now, and I think it's a reflection of the fact you just can't keep up with the argument being presented, and it's as simple as
Yeah,
that.
yeah, definitely, definitely. But okay, so
No, I mean like
I can't keep up.
you
So
really
you
can't
explain
keep
to
up.
me.
It's as simple as that.
You explain to
I'm
me
sorry
then.
you can't keep up. I'm sorry you're not smart enough to.
Okay,
It's not really my problem. You wanted to
try and
debate me and you can't
hold
even
my
keep up with
hand.
my argument.
Try and hold my hand through this then. Come on, you're the sensei here.
Honestly, I've been
Try and
trying, but you're a
hold
little
my
bit
hand
too
through.
stupid.
How do you
I've
get
been trying, trust me.
alternatives? Just
I've
explain that to
very
me.
much been trying to hold your hand through this,
How are
and
there possible alternatives? How is that? How does that come about?
the possibility of alternatives is a consequence of the fact that like different expressions of will, so to speak, is possible on account of the fact that the object of our will is in a continual process of development and change and is not fixed into one thing.
And
So this is
it could
why
have
there's
developed in a different way.
distinction. What?
It could have developed in a different way, and that's where you're getting alternatives.
It could not. No, I mean.
Oh, so that's not it.
No. Not that it couldn't have developed in a different way, but that it's in the process of development in the first place. Not that there's an alternative path of development. Maybe there isn't.
Okay,
right?
so that's not where alternatives come from. So where do they come from?
Yes, actually, it is though.
Okay,
that's my whole point.
So they could have developed in a different way.
That is absolutely where the alternatives come from.
So they could have developed in a different way.
Can you calm down for a second and like let me try to explain this to you? Like you're really frustrated. Like it's really
so true.
Would you like to like hear why I'm saying that, you know, even if there's like potentially post hoc or not post hoc, but after the fact, a fixed line of development, that this is actually ultimately the reason why there is like the possibility of like these different passive choices people can make?
Sure. How about, you know, you know
okay,
my.
So you're not interested.
Hold on. I'm gonna give you the floor if you listen to me. I'm saying, how about I'm gonna give you the floor to say whatever the hell you want for as long as it takes to make that point. I'm not going to interrupt a single time. All I want to know is, how do you explain the possibility of alternatives? Me being a communist versus me being a capitalist. Me choosing the Coke versus me choosing the Pepsi. How do you explain the existence of those alternatives on dialectical materialism? And I will not interrupt you a single time.
Because we have because the capacity that we have to achieve or attain insight into the underlying necessity of our existence, which is my definition of what a human being is, that capacity can be expressed and effective in ways that don't necessarily participate directly into insight into necessity. So there's a degree of what we would think colloquially is freedom, right? But from this perspective would just be arbitrariness, where I can use the same thing that I need as a human being to choose, so to speak, to be human, to choose to have insight into necessity. That can also be applied to choose, Pokemon versus Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's what's responsible for the possibility of alternatives. Now, whether or not the fact I choose Pepsi versus Coca-Cola at the scale of the individual is predetermined by some mechanism, maybe it is, but it's not the same one that I'm talking about when I'm talking about historical materialism and Marxism. That's all I'm saying. Like maybe on some psychological level or on the level of physics, like gusts of wind or, chemical imbalances or something, like those could play a factor. I'm not really going to commit to the physics question of whether like it's completely predetermined or there's like wiggle room of possibility. I'm just saying that's distinct from the causal mechanism or the causality in the sense relevant to historical materialism. That's all.
Okay, so again, you didn't actually explain how alternatives are possible. In fact, you said, I'm not going to commit to a position on whether physics could impact this. I'm not going to commit to any of these things. So you didn't actually explain how alternatives are possible. I'm not even going to hold you
I did explain.
to the position that how alternatives are possible.
Did I or did I not just explain to you that the same thing, the same faculty we have to actually affect a real act, a real choice as I'm talking about it, right? We can also apply that to things that don't consequentially amount to a free choice. Does that make no sense to you?
Okay, so I could have made alternative decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. You can make
alternative
free will decisions. But the only
are we going to commit free will?
What did I say about free will in the beginning of this debate? Do you remember?
Free will means I can make decisions. Are we going to commit to that or not? I don't care what you said an hour ago, because again, you keep changing your positions.
You can't make decisions as a self-sovereign, vacuum-sealed subject.
Okay, so you're always going to make the same choices. Got it. So that's not where alternatives come from.
Okay, so I'll like mentally represent your position in this way, or I'll like represent your position in this way. You're claiming that the only way we can account for the possibility that people make different decisions is if we regard people as vacuum sealed, self-sovereign subjects that in no way In no way can their choices or decisions be evaluated on the basis of their relational significance. That it's just this vacuum sealed, arbitrary, individual choice made in a vacuum, influenced by no other factors. And, that is the only way we can have choice or decisions proper. Why would you still commit to this line of argumentation when, for the purposes of argument, you said you were willing to concede to my definition of decisions and choices? That's why I don't really understand like where you're coming from here. If for the purposes of argumentation, the entire premise of this line of inquiry is that you're going to commit to my understanding of what a choice is or what a decision is, why do you then, at the outcome of your line of inquiry, bring back your definition of choice and decision making, which you were willing to discard for the purposes of argumentation? This is the fundamental fallacy that I can identify in your position here.
So, I mean, would there have been an alternative as far as how this debate ends up going? Because I don't think it's going your way. Could I have argued poorly?
I have full faith and confidence in audiences to evaluate and judge that for themselves. But I'm pretty confident and firm on my position here, and I just don't think you have been able to keep up or follow through with the very line of inquiry that you yourself have begun with respect to this debate. You decided to debate me about free will versus determinism.
Yep.
You decided to ask me a bunch of questions about the Marxist view on this. I satisfactorily and comprehensively responded to this. You're not satisfied with the response because you either seem to not understand
it's not that I'm not
you have reached
satisfied.
the limit of your ability to keep up with the chain of argumentation you yourself have engendered. So it's like if this is the end of the line for you, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, it's not that I can't keep up, Haz. That's not it at all. I have kept up. I am perfectly satisfied with all of your descriptions of Marxism, Leninism, and the dialectical theory of history. I'm perfectly satisfied with all of that. I just want you to explain how it's possible on this theory of history for there to be alternative lines of history. How do you explain that I could have been a communist or I could have been a capitalist right now?
But you being a communist or a capitalist is not necessarily of any historical import until,
I don't care if it's important.
Practically, hold on. Historical import in the sense that it's not historically going to have any meaningful significance until
Again, I don't care that
you actually. Oh well, you're interrupting me. I don't think you want to hear what I'm saying.
Again, I don't care if it's important or not that I ended up in the alternative of communist or capitalist.
But the reason it is important, according to the very line of inquiry you established, is because if we're understanding history to be like the ultimate receptacle of determination, is that not why you're talking about alternative histories? Or maybe we should clarify what we mean by history. I don't think there's anything historical about choosing Pepsi over Coke, but I do think there's a historical significance to a revolution or a profound war or something that's like at the scale of a society, or the American War of Independence. I just don't think that the choices people make within the the farm or the playpen that they're within a given historical epoch, like pigs rolling in this mud versus the shit over there. Like, I don't think that's actually historically relevant. Or I don't think it's relevant with respect to the mechanism of any determination or causal determination Marxism regards as significant.
So again, I do not give... hold on. I let you speak. Yeah. I don't give a single hoot whether or not my ending up in the alternative of me being a communist or me being a capitalist. I don't give a hoot whether or not that would have led to a sooner or later or any difference in the progression of the dialectic process. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you, by what mechanism could you possibly explain that alternative even exists in the first place?
I've been trying to explain that, but you just keep interrupting me and you just keep ignoring.
No, you just keep obfuscating.
Well, I could be very slow with you if you would prefer that.
Sure, but as long as you also stop obfuscating.
Well,
you be as slow as you want.
Of obfuscating.
You know exactly what I mean by that, Haz. It's what you've been doing the whole time. Just trying to go down random little tangents, not quite answering the question. You're basically being a politician. Have you seen that clip from Cheers? The politician comes in and he doesn't answer. Frasier says he's not saying anything. Have you seen that clip?
I think
that's what you're doing.
Flustered, and you need to calm down a little bit.
I'm very flustered right now. I want you to be real slow and just give me one single thing. Explain how alternatives are possible. That's all I want. And I'll calm right down.
Are you talking about his alternative histories or alternative choices an individual within a given historical epoch could possibly make? Because I'm trying to say those are very different things.
So I think I've been pretty crystal clear here. I'm asking about the one branch of the past. It could have gone either that I end up a communist or I end up a capitalist in this right this moment, right?
Yeah.
I want you to explain the mechanism by which it's possible for there to be this alternative on dialectical materialism. That's all I want.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to know, like, are you assuming within my framework? Like, are we working within my framework where I'm saying that being a
Yes.
communist is going to become historically consequential? Because if you
No,
think
no,
that
no.
consequentiality
Not that.
of
Not
history
that.
is irrelevant, don't say communism versus capitalism. Let's just do like Pepsi versus Coke.
Pepsi
Then.
versus Coke. Let's say I
Okay.
bought a Coke earlier. Could it have
Yeah.
possibly been that there was this alternative where I buy Pepsi? And if it
Yeah,
is
why
the
not?
case,
Why not?
okay, so it is
Yeah.
the case. How can you explain that on dialectical materialism? That there are these alternative paths that I could have gone down?
Sure. In the same way that we can understand, for example, a biological organism to have a certain kind of predetermination, there is a wiggle room of like arbitrary kind of distribution of like different outcomes that's possible for that same organism for a host of arbitrary causal reasons, right? And so that's basically, and then furthermore, though, I would say that in addition to the fact of like the influence of arbitrary factors, the very faculty that we possess, which allows us to participate in the determination of history, can also be applied in trivial, non historically consequential ways. So that would be my fundamental argument there. The same faculty that we have that makes it possible, not necessarily like inevitable in the sense of like passively preordained, but possible for us to participate in novel historical determinations is also a faculty that can be applied to trivial, non-historical outcomes that can only be understood as passive acts.
So within this wiggle room, right? Because earlier I was getting from you that this wiggle room,
Yeah.
it is predetermined. Whether you're going to scream in the Walmart, whether you're going to pick the Pepsi or the Coke.
No. But I think that, can you understand for 1 second that whether or not that wiggle room is predetermined is irrelevant from the Marxist perspective? Maybe you could say it's psychological. Maybe you could say it's caused by some kind of chemical disposition within you. Maybe you could say it's like some kind of physically predictable outcome. I think that's a physics question if you're going down that line of inquiry. Or maybe there's just this randomness that's inherent within us that you could say that we can just arbitrarily draw upon. But a choice. I think choices, there are reasons underlying choices, real choices, right? And I think that under your framework, the possibility that a choice could be rational, I don't think there's much room for that if this is really where you're getting,
so you
did
give me the mechanism there. You said that there is some randomness within us. Now I want to know how there could possibly be randomness under dialectical materialism.
Randomness both within nature and within us.
Yeah, how do you explain that on dialectical materialism?
Within dialectical materialism, determinations, one of their tendencies is to repeat, right? Something that is already established as, possible or existent, either continues to reproduce its existence or continues to repeat and interact arbitrarily in a host of different permutations and so on and so on. And the idea of the transition of quantity into quality is that eventually we have qualitatively new determinations, which kind of break that pre-existing threshold of random permutations of possibility and establish a novel possibility, right? So how is it possible there could be randomness? Well, the randomness is below the threshold of the novel possibility, where it is all the same, basically, and may as well all be the same.
Wait, hold on.
Speak.
I want to be very clear here. So the randomness, this random number generator, what have you, it's all the same. It doesn't matter which path it goes down.
From the perspective of an actual novel determination, yeah, it may as well all be the same.
So then that doesn't explain how there are alternatives. Because it might as well be any other way. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like I think Pepsi or Coke, it may as well be the same.
Okay, so So that then there are different choices. There are different possible paths, at least, given this random mechanism.
Yeah, but the
But
paths
those
don't
paths might
become.
not amount to something big, societal.
Now you get it. You
Okay,
see,
okay,
you're
great,
kind of
great,
learning. You understand, right?
great. So, why, right? Why couldn't it be the case that this random mechanism just suddenly tomorrow spits out that every single person is going to be a capitalist, and that they will keep being a capitalist for the next 10 million years? Why couldn't that happen?
Because each and every person is going to be continuously affected or impressed, like not in the sense of the colloquial sense, but like you know, like received, be a receptacle of information, so to speak, with the reality of the contradictions of the society we live in, and they're going to respond and react to those ways with a degree of variability, but in ways that ultimately reflect the reality. Now, what is going to be the distribution of that? You have to look at a confluence of different factors: class positions, demographic backgrounds, ages, what part of society you occupy, and so on and so on. But even if, arbitrarily somehow, I mean, I just don't think the wiggle room for what you're proposing as possible exists, because yes, there are material determinations that define the threshold of wiggle room. In this case, there's not enough for that to even be
Hold on,
possible.
there is enough, because you already said the wiggle room exists for me to be a capitalist right now. So why couldn't the
Yeah.
random number generator generate that everybody's a capitalist right now? That wiggle room is still there.
Even if I did think the wiggle room was there, which I don't, it would be such an infinitesimally low probability. It's not even worth like
But it is
considering.
possible.
I see no reason why that would be possible. Like I see
Well,
no reason why it would be.
the
If
reason
it's
is
such an
exactly what you told me, that I was randomly selected to be a
if our
capitalist.
statistics, yeah, at the scale of an individual, we can't speak directly of like causal mechanisms of determination with any degree of certainty. But if you're asking like tomorrow, then if because of that fact you have the wiggle room to choose Pepsi over Coke, I don't know why you keep obfuscating the argument with the capitalism
Well,
thing.
no, there was the wiggle room for me to become a capitalist. Was there also then
Okay,
not
let's just
the wiggle
focus
room
on the
for everybody
Pepsi
to be a
or
capitalist
Coke thing, because I
already?
think you're opening up a can of worms,
I know
so to
why you don't
speak,
want to
that I
talk
don't
about
think
this,
you're
because I think you know where it's going.
okay.
That
No,
society
no.
could go in a different
you like me to
direction than the
explain
dialectic
no, would
says.
you like me to explain no, I just don't want to confuse you. I'll be happy to talk about it, but you seem to be confused
Oh,
every
it's really
time
not
we use the
confusing
example.
distinction here. They're clearly analogous.
Every time we go down the path of inquiry of capitalism versus communism, you seem to be confused about the scale of like individual arbitrary choices versus consequential historical determinations and outcomes. So I'm trying to help you by focusing on Pepsi versus Coke,
No,
so that you
specifically,
don't,
I'm
because
showing that
you
on
said you
your
don't care.
theory of the
Okay, the
random
reason
number
is
generator.
you said
You
you
don't
don't.
get this. That you don't get this necessity of
Did you
communism.
did you not claim that you don't care about historical outcomes? Isn't that what you said? Well, the
Yeah.
question of capitalism versus communism is going to, absolutely bring forth the relevance of historical outcomes within this framework. So
No,
if
no,
you
no.
want to avoid
Specifically, what I
talking about
said, I want to be
historical,
clear here.
okay,
Specifically, what I said is I don't care whether my ending up on the communist or capitalist path, I don't care if that has any significant impact on history 10,000 years into the future. I don't care about that. But then we got down into you saying that there
no,
is
I'm
this
just
random
saying it's
number
a different
generator which determines
relationality.
whether or not somebody comes out as a capitalist or
There's
communist.
a
So why
distinction.
couldn't
Okay,
that random number generator generate that everybody's a
because
capitalist right now?
there's absolutely a distinction between the relationality implied by being like a committed communist Bolshevik who's participating in some kind of revolutionary praxis. There's a different dimension of historical import and the determination of history between that and choosing Coca-Cola over Pepsi. So if you don't want to talk about novel historical outcomes and what I would consider a free act, and you just want to explain like why is it that we can use our free will to affect outcomes that are empirically different, such as choosing Pepsi over Coke, choose the Pepsi versus Coke argument. You want to open the can of worms of historical materialism, I'd be happy to go down that path. It just seems like you're not committed to.
Do you think that they're not analogous? Me having the alternative of Pepsi or Coke, does that not already establish that there are alternatives possible, and that therefore there could be the alternative possible of me being a communist versus me being a capitalist? And then if we abstract that a further level, that is the case for everybody.
hold on. The common denominator is you have a will, but the question of the relationality of your will in relation to practice is what's important for a Marxist when we're talking about what is a truly free act. Because remember, there's the free part and then there's the act part, right? The free part is there maybe when you're choosing Pepsi versus Coke, but the act is passive.
Again, you'll notice that I'm not actually talking. I've never said the word free for the past like hour now.
You
I'm
never
not talking.
said free will throughout
I'm
the
not
debate.
talking. Oh my god, you know exactly what I mean. I'm not talking about freedom. I'm not talking about that. I'm ceding the zone of
Really?
freedom.
You weren't
I'm
talking about free will and
I'm
free choice?
I'm
Isn't that what you
talking
said
about
your position hinges
alternatives.
upon?
I'm talking about
But
alternatives
didn't
here.
you say
I'm
that?
using that language. Okay, let's say I
Okay.
was the whole time. Now I'm talking about alternatives. Now there's the alternative of me either having Pepsi or Coke, right? Now, does that not then extend out that there is also the alternative of me being a capitalist or me being a communist right now? And then, if we extend that out to everybody, there is the alternative of everybody being a capitalist or everybody being a communist, or 99% people being capitalist and 99% people, 1% people being communist, so on and so forth. So, and this is all based on your random number
Yeah.
generator. Could that random number generator not have rolled
Well,
out
that
that
would be
everybody is now a
if I'm willing
capitalist?
to commit to the view that 100% of the reason for why people make the choices that they do is randomness. Where I think what I actually said
Oh,
is
so
that at
that's
the
not your
scale of
mechanism
the
of alternatives.
no, because at the scale of the
No, it's not.
individual,
Okay,
there
good.
is
So then where is your mechanism of
wait,
alternatives?
wait, hold on. I'll be happy to talk about it when you're willing to not interrupt me.
Okay, go ahead. What is your mechanism of alternatives?
So, what I said at the scale of individual choice is that for Marxists, it's not relevant, but it's probably a confluence of different arbitrary factors, potentially combined with a degree of randomness and wiggle room. But to say that it is 100% just like entirely random for why people do the things that they do, I'm not really willing to commit to that ridiculous view when it comes to the choices individuals make. But I do think there's a degree of arbitrariness and wiggle room that does kind of express a certain kind of sensitivity human beings have to maybe the ontological randomness of the cosmos and the universe, maybe, who knows. But to say 100% of the choices, the reasons for the choices that we make are a consequence of arbitrariness and randomness would be ridiculous.
Is it the case that for any individual, there is the alternative possibility that they're a capitalist?
Um, where does possibility become probability for you, though? Does the relationship between those two things not matter?
Not particularly, no.
Like,
I just want to know if it could possibly have been.
so within this impossible, like, vacuum sealed context where we ignore like all of the factors that actually do influence the reasons people adopt the worldviews that they do, we have to like bracket all of that and ignore all of that and just say if we like kidnap people and put them in like a vacuum sealed room, can we give them the choice to do X, Y, and Z? Well, maybe, but I don't see how that's meaningful for an evaluation or understanding of the actual world we live in.
Right, but for any individual, there are those alternatives available. Is that the case?
Why not?
Okay, so why then, when we let's talk about 10 individuals, is there the possibility
It's
that
kind
there
of
is
like an elementary
that
is
all those
ought
alternatives,
confusion
that we could go
we're
down all
having.
of those alternatives at the same time, that they're all capitalists for 10 people?
So hold on. If you have 10 given people, is it possible that all of them could go down a capitalist pipeline?
Yeah.
Potentially, why not?
What about 100?
Well, and I understand the question you're asking. 10 is
Yeah.
not really significant statistically in terms of encompassing a sufficient degree of like let's say the 10 were distributed in a way that sufficiently reflected the differing conditions that a given individual grows up in, or a given set of experiences they grow up in. I think you do need a certain threshold of data for it to be like an accurate reflection of the variation that's possible. This is elementary to statistics that you need to scale up to actually get a um,
Yeah.
accurate picture of like the variation within populations, because you could easily just
Mm-hmm.
kind of have these accidental, like I did a random sample of 10 individuals around the world and they all happen to like prefer, Subway over Quiznos or something. It's like, well, but you don't have enough data to actually like determine whether that actually reflects at scale the variations of people's preferences around the world, right? It
Yep.
could very well just be like a random sample that you took that just happened to accidentally look that way.
So on the question of 100, could those
Yeah.
100 people have gone down the capitalist route?
There are at least 100 people in the world who profess to be anarcho-capitalists. So
Yes,
sure.
so it's got to be the case, right? What about 10,000?
Again, I'm sure there are at least 10,000.
A million.
How about we go at 1 billion or 2 billion or 3 billion, right? Just like speed it up.
Sure.
No, because
Whoa,
clearly,
when did it change?
yeah, well, it changed when we got more data that actually reflects the degree of variation of the conditions individuals grow up in and the various factors that influence and shape the outcomes of individual ideological worldviews. And we can see from the data that it's not the case
Well,
that,
no, I'm not
that
asking
many
about the world
people.
as we currently are, right? I'm not
Oh, you're
asking about that.
like some like
I'm asking.
vacuum sealed context.
Hold on. You're saying that these alternatives, on the individual level, they come about from
Yeah.
your random number generator, right? And at
No,
some
I
point,
didn't say
hold
that.
on.
I didn't say
At
that.
least in
I
part from
never
your
said
random
it
number
was
generator.
entirely
Sorry.
random.
At least
Hold
in
on.
part from your random number generator.
I feel like I've
At
been
least
pretty
in part.
precise and clear.
Will you accept with at least in part? At least in part.
Zulu, I think I've been pretty precise and clear about
But
the fact that
do you disagree with that? At least in part, it comes from the
Why are you
random number
so
generator.
startled? Like, can you calm down a little bit? I
At
never
least
said
is that true or not? At least in part. From the
Zulu, I
random number
never said
generator.
it was. Can you calm down? I never said it was 100% random.
At least in part.
I never made that argument.
Do you know what at least in part means?
Yeah, in part.
In part, okay.
Precisely, in part.
In part, it came from the random number generator on the scale of 10 people. Okay, and then it was still in part on the scale of 100 people. Then at some point, by the time that we get to 8 billion people, then it somehow no longer works. So what is the fundamental distinction here?
But you're committing a fallacy because you're neglecting the dimension of the randomness in the sampling. It's the sampling which is potentially random, right? In that case.
Oh, so when you're talking about your random number generator, you're not talking about me specifically.
I never mentioned a random number generated.
That's just my word for it. The randomness in whatever process, right?
To clarify,
so to be clear, that randomness is in the sampling of people, not in me personally being a capitalist or communist. So you haven't explained how I could have been either a capitalist or a communist. You haven't explained the alternative then.
Okay, I will very much explain to you patiently, to simplify everything for you, that I think there are just about as many anarcho-capitalist LARPers in the world that is possible, more or less. Maybe there could be an extra 12 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 even, but more or less, there is more or less the same amount of possible anarcho-capitalists in the world today as could ever be possible, given the conditions of our current existence.
Again, not what I'm asking.
So when you're asking me like, why can't there be 2 billion anarcho-capitalists in the world? I could try to explain that for you, but you're asking like, is there enough wiggle room for people to arbitrarily just adopt this comprehensive anarcho-capitalist worldview? There's not enough for 2 billion people to. There's just, from what we can perceive from the data, because I'm not claiming to be omniscient, omnipotent God, it seems to be that the amount of people who can stumble into that retarded position have already.
So again, specifically what I'm asking, because now you're saying this randomness, that's in the sampling. It's a random sampling of the population.
No, you're
I'm asking, where is the alternative for me personally to either become a capitalist or communist?
No, Zulu, can I be clear about something? I said if you were to sample 10 people around the world, and is it possible that you could end up with all those 10 people being anarcho-capitalists, that would be a randomness with respect to your sampling. You're asking me, is it possible for people to end up as anarcho-capitalists to choose that pipeline? Well, if we combine the confluence of, with whatever arbitrary wiggle room that I would consider rational or reasonable to expect, I think you'll end up with the amount we have right now, more or less. So that's my answer to your question.
So I think you're confused. Where we got here, how we got to the randomness mechanism, was you answering how there are possibly alternatives with respect to me as an individual being either a communist or a capitalist right now. So that
Right.
randomness mechanism is going to be pointing at some particular individual and putting them on some particular path rather than another, at least in part, right? At least in part, it's nudging them either in the communist
Yeah.
direction or the capitalist direction, in the Pepsi
Right.
direction or the Coke direction. So
Yeah.
I was
I
abstracting
think
that
you
out
could find
over
yeah,
multiple people.
you could collect like you could kind of generalize like a degree of like terminally online extremists and like all categorize them as like subjected to the same material causes and conditions and like whether or not they become
Oh no no no! But
you
it's
know
not that.
anarcho-capitalists or
It's not that
fascists or
it's not
communists.
that they're acceded to the same material causes and conditions, because you're saying there's alternatives here. So that is the irrelevant part.
Hold on. There are only a given number of people who are drawn to terminally online extreme ideologies, right?
What causes
Because of
that number?
material factors. I would say material factors probably
Okay.
are mainly responsible.
Uh,
Now, the variation as far as what pipelines people end up in, further can be explained by material factors. For example, the preponderance of capital and investment and money that goes into like
so the pipeline
propaganda
you're in
and
is also
influencing.
material. Okay, got it.
Yeah, there's aspects of the pipeline that are also material, but there is an kind of small degree of wiggle room of arbitrariness, maybe. And by the way, I've always said maybe, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say so. Which enables the possibility that a given person who might be disposed to adopting a certain pipeline can adopt another, right?
So the maybe
So
there
like what?
is
Yeah.
what it. So then you don't have any hinging that there could be possible alternatives. You're
Well,
saying
the
maybe there
maybe
could. You don't have any argument for it.
I would say the maybe has to be. So when we say that it's random, what we're truly talking about is randomness from the perspective of what we can identify as determining factors and determining causes. Now, whether things can truly and finally really be random, I think is a contentious argument within physics and so on and so on. I lean no, right? But with respect to the factors and conditions that we can identify and know about, I would say that's where randomness becomes what it is. I'm still insisting though that the ultimate source of the arbitrariness or the possibility of the alternative comes from the same faculty that makes it possible for people to actually attain and achieve a free act.
So
So
bottom
that is
line,
my underlying
there
argument.
there are alternatives or there aren't.
There are alternatives because everyone shares the same faculty that makes it possible to effect a free act.
Okay, so how could we have gone down the different alternative where I'm the communist and you're the capitalist? How could that have occurred?
Um, how could it have occurred that we would switch places right now in terms of the positions that we have?
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, I don't know if we swapped places and I, grew up with the same set of experiences that you did, or
Okay.
maybe,
So then you're talking about just pure transposition where we're both the same person in the same circumstances, and I grew up looking like you and you grew up looking like me and having the same
mhm.
positions as me. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking
Maybe if
about
you were
we're
more,
both
maybe if you
you're
were,
born
maybe
in
if,
like wherever the hell you were born.
yeah,
I was born in the United Kingdom, and then
I would
I
say
end
that,
up being
no, no,
the
okay, to
communist,
make
you
it
end up being
simple
the
for you,
capitalist.
I think that at this level, we can talk about potentially, at least with respect to, at some level, we can talk about the normative dimension for sure. We could say that this person well, before we get to the normative dimension, we could say that this person is more knowledgeable, this person potentially is smarter, they're quicker at understanding things. Or we could talk about the normative dimension in addition to that, which, I mean, it's kind of hard to excise the dimension of intelligence and committing to learning from normativity, right? But we could talk about how moral of a person are you, right? How good of, what is your character? Are you a coward who is, presented with the simple choice between taking the steak and the blue pill and the red pill, and you just decide, you know what, I'm too much of a coward to take a risk, whatever. then we have to talk about like the normative dimension. At some level, we have to talk about that. The reason I don't universally apply that to all of society simultaneously is because I don't think everyone gets the same level of education to know the choice that they're making in the first place, to know the content of what that choice actually amounts to. But can you speak of people who kind of are confronted with the consequences of their choices truly and comprehensively and still decide to, take the satanic route, so to speak, like when Satan chose what he did? Yes, absolutely. People can make that choice, but the outcome of their choice is not going to lead to any kind of novel determination of history. It's going to be a kind of attempt to suppress the knowledge that we can have of the development of history and mankind. So, if that's what you're getting at and what you're asking, then I would say yes. There is a normative dimension at play for sure. How comprehensive is that normative dimension? I wouldn't universalize it and use it as a kind of paradigm for the explication of all the choices people make simultaneously within society.
So I want people to go back and look through this line of inquiry and find the first time where I talk about the word normative. It will be right now. Okay, so I want to know how it could have possibly been. Yes.
Do you know what normativity means?
I want to know how it could have possibly been that I ended up the communist in this debate and you ended up the capitalist. I'm not talking about that.
Okay,
you're keeping simply, everything the same, but you call them you, and you, me, and me, you.
I can list, I'm not talking about that. A bunch of factors. I can list a bunch of potential factors.
Go
on. Okay, one of them could be maybe if you had a different set of life experiences that introduced you to communism in a way that was different from how you were introduced to it.
So I could have had those different factors. I could have had those different life experiences.
Again, we're back to like the physics argument. So we're not.
No. I just want to know if I could have had those different life experiences, because this is what you're pointing at as the possibility for alternative. So could I have had those different life experiences?
Could you have had different life experiences?
Yeah.
Could you have been born disabled and blind?
That's my question towards you. Could I have had different life experiences?
What does that have to do with choice?
I'm just asking you, Matt. I'm trying to get down to your mechanism for alternatives.
I don't feel like I need to.
Could I have had different life experiences?
I don't feel like I need to commit to like a multiverse theory of physics.
I don't care if you do a multiverse theory of physics. I don't care how you do it. I just want to know what mechanism you use.
But you're insisting that I like talk about it. Could it have been possible that Hurricane Katrina didn't happen?
I'm not insisting that you subscribe to the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. That is not what I'm insisting here. I'm insisting
Hurricane Katrina,
for you to explain how these different life experiences could have come about.
I wanted to list
could those different life experiences have come about?
I wanted to list a bunch of different factors.
All I want to know is, could those different life experiences have come about?
But all I did was list one, and then you just kind of cut me off and stared talking about you're looping again, because I already mentioned how
you stole my thing.
Well, I'm just confronting you with the projection that's at.
Okay, so could I have had different life experiences? Yes or no? It's very simple.
Could the gust of wind that blew in one direction have blown in a different one in your life? I can't answer that. But what
so
I can
you can't
say
answer.
Is
so that's not where the alternatives come from on your worldview. Where do they come from?
What?
Where do they come from? Because you said you can't explain on that level. So where do you think the alternatives come from?
I tried to list but after just retreading one of the factors, you cut me off and you didn't allow me to list the other ones.
Correct.
So I guess you just don't want to hear anything.
I guess so, right? If that's what you think people are going to read from this situation.
Why are you cutting me off? Okay, so we mentioned the first thing. Let's just call that the gust of wind factor, right? The factors that are just beyond the control of anyone's choices, and
and you can't point to any alternatives there. So let's move on to the next one.
Well, hold on. We can point to alternatives in the sense that people have had different. Hold on, that people have had different experiences other than you.
No, me. Could I have had different experiences?
As an individual, have had a different experience.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe it's not relevant, right?
So you don't know. So you can't explain alternatives there.
What do you mean?
You're saying maybe I could have had different childhood experiences, maybe I couldn't have. So that's not the
Maybe
source of
maybe
your
you could have been born
alternatives.
blind. Maybe you could have been born blind.
Right, so that's
Maybe
not the source of
you
your alternatives.
all
Because
we
you don't
know is
know
that
about that.
there's a specific distribution statistically of people that are born blind. So we know it is possible. We know it's possible for
But
human
you
beings
don't
to
know
be
how to
born
explain
blind.
it on the individual
Could
level.
you specifically have been born blind? I don't know if I can answer that question.
Right, so that's not the source of your alternatives.
But it's okay. Zulu, did you not compare us two? You said between Haz and Zulu, right? So I
Okay.
have to mention things that are beyond your control, beyond your capacity to choose,
Okay.
because those are factors that do in part shape the worldviews we come to adopt, things that are just outside of our control. So I have to at least list them off at least one time.
Sure. But I'm just saying, on this first one, that can't be your source of alternative options. Because you can't explain that.
But
you don't know about anything about that.
Hold on, but if we're comparing, why does Haz have the worldview he does, and why does Zulu have the worldview he does? We have to make that the causal explanation for the alternatives. Okay. Now, if you're talking about alternatives that are strictly possible with respect to a given individual, right? Then don't compare you and I. Just say me specifically.
Okay, so for me specifically. Could I have had the alternative of being a communist?
Yeah, I think if you were smarter and had better character,
okay, could I have been smarter and had a better character?
Yes.
How?
I mean, maybe if you found it within yourself to be less of a coward. And
could I have found it in myself to be less of a coward in the past?
You could have, yeah. You chose not to, evidently.
How? How could I have done that?
Well, I think you were confronted at one point with perhaps the reality or the possibility of like having a backbone and being a principled, normal human being, and you rejected it because you were scared of it, or you.
So I was able to choose to reject it. Like I had total free will in that moment.
You had the free will, yes.
So I could have chosen to go down one path or the other.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're in free will.
I never denied free will even one time.
Okay, great. So we're in free will. So then why isn't that the case for everybody? The type of society we get is based on the choices people make. Hold on a minute.
No,
that's a bit at odds with the dialectical materialism, isn't it?
You made quite a leap there. You made quite a leap.
Did I? So am I different to every other human? I'm just completely different. Only I had choices.
Do you remember when I said that we cannot universalize the normative within my framework? That to some extent,
I'm not saying a norm here. I'm not saying a norm here.
Okay, well, let's say the moral, right? We cannot universalize.
I'm not saying the moral here. I made no moral points. I'm not talking in ethics here, man.
I'm
talking in metaphysics.
Okay, if I said that the alternative, at some level, we can make the choice on the basis of, how good of a character we have or how morally upright we are, which is basically what I was saying, right? Then yes, we're talking about something moral. And I had previously stated, if you're following the line of inquiry or argumentation here, that we can't universalize that to all of society. Why? Because that specific dimension of wiggle room is confined to a very small corner or part of the society, which is people who have actually been exposed and educated correctly with the possibility of the consequences of their worldview or their action. And still, like Satan, for example, Satan, you don't have to be religious, it's just like analogously, right? Satan was presented with, to some extent, the knowledge of the consequences of his act and still chose the evil thing, right? Most people who fall under Satan's influence, so to speak, have not committed the same free choice that Satan has made. Most people don't necessarily know the consequence of the act. Most people don't have a good understanding of the relationality between the thought and the practice, right? So we can't universalize that. I could just say at some level it has relevance potentially, but only under a specific set of conditions, which we can't universalize.
I just want like the total upshot of all this, right? That I did get the decision ultimately of whether I'd be a communist or a capitalist, whether I'd be smart and handsome and moral and then I would end up a communist, versus what I've done. I've chosen to be evil and ugly and horrible, right?
Provided that we control for all the other factors, which I'm not sure we can do, then yes. But who said we've already?
So there is at least
controlled for all the
some
other
aspect of
factors?
choice here.
There is some aspect in which you can be confronted with the consequences of your actions, and still, let's say, for the sake of challenging God and saying, I can do this, it is possible, let's see where it goes. Or, for the sake of proving a point, yes, absolutely. You can use the same faculty responsible for the possibility of human beings fulfilling their existence ontologically. You can use that to affect outcomes that are misaligned with that existence. Absolutely.
And so am I like some
Never denied
different,
that.
am I like some sort of higher type of person where I'm able to make choices which put me on different paths, but other people aren't?
I don't know anything about you, so I don't know what you're asking.
So I mean, I might just be a higher type of person, I guess.
I don't know anything about you. Maybe you are just this like fully evil, satanic, Luciferian person who's like
Did I choose to
challenging
be that?
God. Or maybe you're just some like dumb receptacle of a set of conditions that were outside of your control that have made you very passionately committed to a position, which if you understood and it was drawn out to you, the full and comprehensive consequences of which you would repudiate. I don't know you enough to make that judgment.
Okay, so you don't actually know whether that could explain the alternatives in front of me.
For you specifically, because I'm not your therapist and I don't know who you are.
But at least in principle, it could give alternatives, right?
In principle, it could be either or, right? Or a combination, maybe.
And specifically, those alternatives are born from the choices of individuals, whether they choose to be moral and communist and so on and so forth, or they choose to be dirty and horrible and capitalist.
So in this understanding of choice as like a direct fidelity to the faculty of the free will, we cannot entirely explain it that way. But
also, you can't explain it.
There's some extent to which we could be able to do that. Yes, but entirely no, because there are factors outside of our control and outside of our ability. To some extent, there are factors outside of our control that arbitrarily influence us. What?
To what extent? To what extent can you explain these things by free will, and then where does it stop?
So I would say that, for example, when human beings affect a mode of production and a specific threshold of material existence and conditions of existence, it exposes them to a certain range of possible information, of transmitted information and communication and language and so on and so on. It predisposes people to a specific threshold of like possible choices that is by no means unlimited, even at like comparing one person to another based on their class background, based on maybe their demographic background, their set of life experiences, and so on and so on. For example, like the threshold of a certain class of person is much higher for them to adopt one worldview versus another person, right? If you're somebody who's like a member maybe of the bourgeoisie, the threshold is going to be much higher actually for you to adopt the Marxist worldview based on the set of experiences that bias you toward a certain outcome and worldview versus some like a proletarian who actually is exposed to what Marxism is and like actually is able to make the choice in the first place. And we could actually explain that paradox and how that plays out in reality if you so deign to. But it's definitely not like it's not that everyone universally simply adopts the position that they do because of their moral disposition. Because we have actually, as human beings, created a reality. We create a society, we create a mode of production which influences and disposes.
But wasn't that society created by the moral predispositions of people before?
Well, the content of the moral has to include the consideration for the materially possible.
Okay.
So you cannot, in the same way that I refuse to isolate the mental dimension from the material, I also refuse to isolate the moral dimension from the material. Why? Because the moral presupposes a given foundation of material possibilities. The is versus the ought, so to speak. The ought cannot be relevant outside of its relation to the is, right? So
Indeed. Is
the
implies
content of
ought. I agree completely.
the content of the ought, it cannot be meaningful unless it implies or relates itself to the is, right? So in that sense, it's like I can't say, oh, it's entirely just because of morality in a vacuum, because morality doesn't exist in a vacuum. Morality articulates uh, a specific matrix of material determinations that make up a human being. And it reflects specifically the shape, a very specific shape of being, right? Which is the shape of man in the form of the collective existence, the society.
Right. So nowhere in there did you explain how these alternatives are possible unless you're going to maintain, again, you keep changing, if you maintain that a person could choose to be moral and communist versus choose to be immoral and capitalist.
Okay,
Do
for
you
example,
maintain that?
what if I told you, in addition to the moral uh, wiggle room that I told you about, or whatever, right? That there's also class distinctions. There's also certain material
Oh, so based on
conditions
my
that
class,
premise.
I have a different logic available to me.
But why is it that when I list a number of factors that go into it, you're reducing it only and entirely to that factor? Why do you do
Don't you
that? I
think
feel
in
like it's
principles?
fallacious.
Don't you
I
think in
just think it's
principles?
fallacious that when I list a factor, you decide to reduce it to that factor and that factor alone,
Every
which is just
single
not
every
in.
single time I press you on a single one of your factors, I find,
Yeah.
whoops, that's not where the alternatives come from. That
In
happens every
isolation,
single time. So I
okay.
just
Well,
want
the
the
dialect.
one single thing
Okay,
which
but
gives you alternatives. That's all I care
the
about, man.
dialectical argument
This is
doesn't
very
permit
easy.
us.
I think I'm being very clear here.
Okay,
I think you're
right.
being completely
Okay.
obfuscatory.
I just think maybe your problem is you don't understand dialectics, because we can't reduce things to
Oh,
one
perhaps,
factor within
perhaps.
dialectics. Because to comprehend reality one-sidedly means that the one-sided determination in question somehow exists in isolation from other things or in a vacuum. But dialectics regards everything to be interrelated in some way, and that determination
Right.
is only meaningful
In
and
as
possible
much
when
as you
we
don't have
understand it as
choices.
a
That's what it means.
relationality. So it's
We're
like you're
being
just
real here.
insisting.
I was surprised when you opened this debate, trying to deny that you're like a materialist and you'd accept determinism. I thought that would be the easy part, but like you just are so slippery, man.
Well, I disagree. I think I've been pretty consistent throughout.
Is that so? Is that so? Okay. Yeah, so you don't think that you've been engaging in some politician-y language here? That you've been
Absolutely
trying to
not.
slip and slide
I've
away from the
actually,
point?
no, I don't even have like the free space to like be engaging in like rhetorical tricks or politician stuff. I'm genuinely trying to convey to you the Marxist worldview in an educational manner. I don't really have like you're not giving me a lot of wiggle room to perform rhetorical tricks
Oh, so there's
and
no
sleights
wiggle
of
room.
hand.
Sorry, that's predetermined. So it's not up to me.
Very funny, right? But no, you're not giving me the sufficient, like the questions you're asking are very specific and require
Yeah,
meticulous explanation, right? So
yeah.
there's a lot of cognitive energy that has to go into like explaining this, which like I just don't have a lot of room to be like playing games or tricks right now. I'm very faithfully conveying
Well, I don't think
the
I'm the one
Marxist
playing
worldview.
games here.
I But you're the one who accused me of being a politician playing games, and it's just not what's going on.
Yeah. Okay, so you think you've been completely above board and crystal clear the whole time when you're flip flopping between positions
I
the
have
whole
been.
debate?
I think you're refusing to. Maybe you just don't understand what I'm saying, which is fine and okay. I understand it's really complicated, but you should try to like maybe humble yourself and ask what I mean, so that I could better help you understand and educate you with the Marxist view, rather than you continually looping and just confronting me with questions I've already answered.
Yeah, so I think you're being a lot more aggressive before this debate, and I think you figured out very quickly that that was not going to fly. I think you very quickly figured out
I don't know why you're
that
engaging in like a
you're not winning this
meta
debate.
commentary.
Oh, well,
So
I'm
you're
engaging in the
the
meta
person.
commentary
Yeah.
because you're not going anywhere with this line
I
of
think the fact that you're
anything.
starting meta commentary about the debate itself is because you're losing the debate and you
Oh,
can't
is that
even
what you
engage
think?
with the
Okay,
debate
so tell
and the
me
content of it.
where do you explain alternatives? Please explain to me.
I already have
Oh,
pretty
is that so?
satisfactorily. Yeah, if there's something about what I said that you don't understand because you're stupid, you can just ask.
Is that so? Okay, I just please. I'm very basic. I'm very immoral.
Mhm.
I'm very capitalist. I just need to know how we get to these alternatives, man. I know you understand what an alternative is. I know you're gonna really want to just translate this into your like closeted off
Mhm.
Marxian language. I understand you're gonna want to do this. But please just talk like an Englishman. Please. Just
I'm not an
explain.
Englishman,
Please
actually.
explain. I understand you're a Turk or whatever. Please just explain to me how these alternatives are possible. Just use the English language. Just explain how these alternatives are possible. That's all I want.
Alternatives, arbitrary and inconsequential alternatives with respect to the effect of individual choices are possible because the same faculty that we employ to actually participate in truly radically free acts can also be employed for the production of trivial, historically inconsequential outcomes. That is my simple one sentence answer to you, which you just can't engage with.
Okay, so that means, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. That means that I, as an individual, could choose one trivial thing over another trivial thing. The Coke versus the
Mhm.
Pepsi. Right?
Right.
Choice in the sense that every other person on earth means it. Choice in the sense that you can choose
Yeah.
alternative A or alternative
Colloquially.
B.
Yeah. If you want to use
Colloquially.
colloquial,
Yeah,
then yes.
colloquially.
Originally, you were not committed to the colloquial notion of
Yeah,
choice, and you
let's go
said,
with
"No,
the
I don't want the
colloquial
colloquial."
notion of choice. Let's go with the
So you want to
colloquial
change,
notion of
okay? Because
choice.
because originally you were like, "Forget the colloquial. I have a special one that's based in like my
By the
Ayn
way, it's called
Rand, whatever."
colloquial.
That's fine. You can focus on the pronunciation of words, and I can focus on using all the words to prove to your audience and mine that you're a midwit. No problem.
Is that so? Is
But
that
uh,
so?
But anyway, you originally didn't want to entertain the kind of common folk usage of the sensibility of the term. You wanted to employ your special notion of choice, which of
I'm
course
being
I
so
reject.
mean. I'm being so mean, haven't I?
But
Being
if
so
you want
mean
to
to
if you want to
you.
talk about like what choice means to people in an everyday sense, we can do that. No problem.
So again, I'm asking for the specifically what I said there is I'm looking for whether there's a substantive disagreement here. Right? And I think there is a substantive disagreement. I
I
think you're
agree.
just not willing to admit what it
I
is.
think that
You're
you
doing what
believe
every
that.
single communist does. You're just
Mhm.
obfuscating with your language. You're being the politician. This is exactly what I've accused you of already.
Okay. I gave you a one sentence response. What about that was not to your taking, so to speak?
Okay, so please repeat it. Again, I'm slow. I'm slow.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Repeat it.
Okay. Are you going to interrupt me or no?
I will not interrupt you a single word.
Okay. So, the same faculty that enables human beings to participate in the affection of historically novel determinations and developments, ergo, the same faculty that allows us to affect truly and radically free acts into reality, can also be applied to the production and affection of acts, performance of acts, I should say, which are historically trivial and bear no significance with respect to the actual determination of alternative outcomes materially. You could say that the outcome is distinct empirically in the sense that Pepsi is empirically distinct from Coke, but it is inconsequential from the perspective of historical materialism. So the same faculty that allows human beings to participate in history is also employed in non historically relevant forms of behavior and activity. So that's how alternatives are possible, even if they don't automatically lead to transitions in modes of production.
Okay, so at the very least, there is the alternative of me having Pepsi or Coke. As
Yeah,
inconsequential as that might be. Okay, so it is possible for there to be alternatives with
right.
respect to how I move my body, whether I reach out my right arm
Yeah,
or my left arm.
right.
Okay,
Right. But I
and
but I my argument is that the object is an indispensable factor in the determination of whether we can actually say the choice is free. The choice doesn't simply consist in deciding with your will, I want Coke versus Pepsi. The choice also has to involve a specific kind of relationship with the object and with the outcome. And that's where we disagree, perhaps. My understanding of free will and choice is a relational understanding. Your understanding seems to be that we just kind of, based on the whims and fancies of our consciousness, decide to choose things arbitrarily from, maybe not arbitrarily from an internal, I don't know what the internal rationality could possibly be, but we simply
I'm aware.
individually just decide in a vacuum sealed context to choose things, and then we affect those things into reality, and that's how reality is shaped. I obviously reject that view because I regard choice as a relationship between what already exists materially and what relationality we have to that. Because man, specifically
Which is
under
not
my
choice, by the
definition,
way.
is a being defined by self relation and their self reproduction, right? As per the Marxist definition.
Right. So that again, this is what I'm saying. You Marxists, you have completely absurd definitions of every single possible term. It's nonsense. Nobody thinks, oh,
Okay.
choice, that's a relation between what is already materially there and the conditions of it, blah, 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 blah.
I think
Nobody
most people
thinks
do
that.
intuitively regard
Every
choice that way.
single person, if you go out on the do this test, Haz, please do this test, live stream it, go out on the street and ask 100 people, does choice mean that you can select between alternative A or alternative B?
Yeah.
100
have
of
two
them will
responses.
say, yeah, that's what choice means.
I know I have two responses to that. I'm glad you're now deferring to the colloquial authority.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
past the
referring to the
PPAP
colloquial
stuff. I'm glad you're
authority.
engaging in that deference.
Yeah, the
I'm glad
colloquial authority.
you've been humbled in that sense.
Yeah,
Secondly, I
I'm real
actually think
humble.
if we break it down, I think intuitively most people do understand that our capacity to engage in choices is
You mean
determined
capacity?
by our faculty to make choices
Faculty?
is okay. I guess you're very interested in the specific usage or misusage of words.
Specifically,
Whatever.
I'm mocking you because you can't speak English.
Yeah, I'm just not really affected by your mockery. But in any case,
You seem a little bit affected.
the second point I
infected.
was the second. Okay, well, you keep like trying to deflect to prevent me from actually making the point.
Yeah, that's what I'm
making.
doing. I think everybody understands that's what I'm doing.
Most people intuitively agree that choices are not created in a vacuum sealed context, but can only be understood with respect and in relation to the context of what is established as possible. I think most people agree with that.
And by that, what you mean is there are no choices.
Yeah,
because you don't use words in the same way.
When people say they went to 7-Eleven and chose Pepsi versus Coke, they've also implied a context in which they were presented only with the possibility of choosing those two things, or another given quantity or range of different soda products or something, right? But it's always implied in people's everyday usage of choice that there is a deeper context of the threshold of possible different choices that can be made that is not itself something that we choose directly, right?
It's in the context of the fact that they have free will. That's the context of the thing.
We don't choose necessarily to be human. We don't choose to be born on planet Earth.
Oh my god, no way. So we didn't choose that square circles can't exist. I guess the whole free will point is gone. Because you can't choose everything, I guess.
No, I'm just trying
could you choose certain things?
I'm just trying to explain to you like what free will actually is. The
could you choose certain things?
Okay, the free part of free will is not necessarily.
You don't think there's alternatives with respect to free? We've gone over this, Haz. Come on, man.
But you're trying to twist my view that that freedom is insight into necessity, meaning like a truly free act. There's no alternatives. If there could only be really one free act, so to speak, right? You're trying to confuse that. You're trying to confuse that argument very dishonestly with the view that I'm saying that people cannot passively make different choices. Like
passively, what does that mean?
I'm
passive.
not saying that.
What does passive mean?
Well, I've tried to explain it to you. The same faculty that we have that enables us with the possibility of being a Lenin, being a revolutionary. That same faculty enables us to make passive choices as well.
Passive choices meaning determined by the material factors. That's what you said earlier.
We have the capacity to use our will to be passive receptacles of what already exists.
Will. What does will mean?
Well, again, I've tried to explain it to you, but you just...
I think everybody understands that you're spiraling here, Haz. You're spiraling.
I just don't feel that way at
We're
all.
in the
So
mockery phase now. I hope you understand that.
okay. No, I mean, if you wanna basically concede the debate, that's fine. I have no
Yeah,
problem with
I
that.
think that's what people are going to get from this. That I've conceded.
It's like we're in the mockery phase because I can't keep up with your actual argument. Like,
Yeah, that's pretty much what people
congratulations.
are going to get from this. Don't you worry.
Okay. I mean, you basically like interviewed me this entire time. You didn't even commit to a position, and you're
Oh
just
my
like
god,
not
I'm being so
satisfied with the
mean.
responses I gave you.
So mean of me. Oh my god, how could
I
I?
think
How
you were
dare I?
expecting you were gonna like catch me into some like extremely
I expected you to
a
at least say that
self-defeating
that you're a fucking
contradiction.
materialist. You weren't willing to accede to any of Marx's
I
positions.
don't even think you know what matter is in the Marxist view. So
You're right. I don't.
why would I you don't. You don't really know what
Yeah,
materialism
I don't. That's
is,
why I asked you.
actually.
Come on, you're the sensei, man.
You asked me if
You're
I
the
was a
sensei.
materialist. I said, "Yes, I am," and I explained what materialism is.
Okay, so then you do agree that there is no such thing as free will. That mind can't cause
No,
actions.
I
Oh,
very
so you're not a
comprehend
materialist. Like, come on,
I am
man.
okay, well, I guess you're like the authority who decides whether
Yeah,
materialism is
I'm the
compatible with
authority.
free will.
You're correct.
I
I'm the
don't
authority.
respect the you proclaiming yourself to
Come on,
have that
man.
authority.
Clear your throat a little bit.
Yeah, focusing on such trivial details within this debate just shows you've lost it. You've just fallen face
So
flat. You're just unable to
true.
keep up.
I have fallen face flat. I expect your community to post a million clips of this. Don't worry, Haz Al Din community. You can take any clips of my stream you want. They're all Creative Commons. You can post as many clips of my stream or of Haz's stream as you want. I encourage you to
I don't
do
know why
so.
you're so worried and focused on what other people think when I'm just
I'm
trying to
encouraging your
faithfully
community to clip this stream. I'm encouraging
okay.
that. Please
I
do
think you're
so.
just kind of revealing
Has
what
I
you're like
think you should
scared
also
of. I
encourage
don't
your
know.
community to do so. I think that would be appropriate here.
Yeah, I think this just looks really good for you that this is what you're talking about now.
I agree. Has, do you want to encourage your community to clip this? They should clip this. There's a bunch of Haz Al Din clip channels out there.
I think you
There's a bunch
again
of
the
them.
projection of you saying I was spiraling is just self-evidently not
Has,
true.
why don't you encourage
And
your
it's very
community to
clear
clip
that you're
this?
spiraling.
Just say to your community that they should clip this debate.
Why are you so worked up? Can you calm down? You should
Again,
take some
you're running
magnesium.
back. You're running back in the
I think
debate,
your
bro.
cortisol spiking big time, dude. You need to take some
So
magnesium.
true.
Just calm down.
I think if people look at our respective streams, they're going to see me as really high cortisol and you as really low cortisol. And that's why your community should clip this debate. I think that's true. And I'm trying to encourage your community to clip this. Come on, man.
Just get it out of your system, man. Get it all out of your system.
Just clip this debate. Come on, man.
No, keep continue to get it all out of your system, man. Continue to pivot away from any substantive topic of contention and focus on this. No problem.
I want to revel in the meta debate. This is how it works, Haz. You understand that?
Yeah, I think how it works is that when people no longer have anything meaningful to say in an actual debate, they just start falling on the meta commentary about the debate, which is fine. I think you
I
don't
think
really
your
have
whole
anything
community
to
can see how
contribute.
much calmer you're being here than you normally are. You would be so aggressive against me if I was slipping up. You'd be so aggressive against me. Here you're like so like I think we should be more with decorum. Like, come
No, yeah,
on, man. You were
I
setting up
think
a
you're a
blood
little
sports debate here. Come on, man.
I think yeah, no, I think you were expecting me to like quote unquote chimp out because that's what your community claims I do. This is what right wing
It's what
people
you
say
always
that I
do.
do in every debate, and it's just not true. It's just never been true that I do that every debate. The idea that like I'm always like yelling and aggressive every debate is a myth about me that I've disproven on both this debate and every other debate that I've taken much more seriously. But when I do actually like get super aggressive and yell and stuff, it's usually because I'm in a certain mood. I haven't gotten a lot of sleep. I'm being like frustrated because someone is like unwilling to even hear anything I'm saying and interrupting me. But right now, I've gotten really good sleep last night, and I'm pretty just like in a good mood, and I just like really am not cortisol maxing at all. And it's, you know, you can read into it and be like, oh, I must be performing so well. And that's why he's not getting angry at me and
Yeah.
like being aggressive. But I feel like that's like, even from a common sense perspective, when people accuse me of chimping out, they're being like, oh, you're doing that because you just lost the debate, right? So, like, which one is it really?
Oh,
It
so you're
doesn't even make
projecting.
sense. No, I'm just saying it's kind of like irrational
No, you
when
think
like I've
chimping
gotten
out
this like
means that you're
I've
losing the
gotten this like
debate, and that's
unfair
why that's what you're
reputation of
accusing
like
me of.
I have this like unfair reputation of like chimping out because I'm losing the argument. But when I'm entirely calm, you're like saying, no, no, no. The reason you're not chimping out is because I'm actually doing so well, and you
As
only get
do you
angry at
not
people who
remember?
suck.
Do you not remember how this whole thing started? I remember. I came to you and said, "Hey, let's do this." I was ignored by Jake Shields, so on and so forth. And then
Why is that my problem?
I had to send in the army, the Zuluwaffen, right?
Okay.
I had to send
My
them
my
in.
army would destroy your
And then you
so-called
got
army.
very
No problem.
angry. You were so angry all the time. Your cortisol was through the roof. You're getting angry about everything, every little thing, setting you off the fucking ticker.
Because I'm
That's
willing
how
to
this
debate almost
started.
anyone.
This is how this
You're trying
started, man.
It started because you were trying to falsely imply that I was dodging you or evading you, which just wasn't true.
Correct.
I just never knew who you
Correct.
were.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, like,
And then
how is
all
it my fault that Jake Shields was not taking up the offer of bringing a 6,000 follower British guy to Vegas to debate me? Like, how is that my problem?
that's what I had to do, man. That's what I have to fucking do. And you were getting so rowdy. You're getting so fucking rowdy. And now you're not.
Zulu, you tried to send your like pissant tiny army to challenge me, and I just
And it
responded by
worked.
giving you my army,
And it
right?
worked. And it worked.
Well, I mean, if that's the only way you could get my attention, it just shows you're pretty irrelevant, honestly.
And I have defeated you in this debate. I think we can all agree.
If that's what makes you feel better, we should just let the audience decide.
Sure.
You know,
I mean,
I
we can
don't
end it
think
there.
you.
I don't think we're going to get much more room on this front of argument.
Well, if you just can't take any more of it and you got to tap out here, sure.
Yeah, I'm so scared. I got to tap out right now. Please, please, master, please.
Okay. I mean, is there anything else, or like,
No,
do you
I
have
mean,
any like actual point to make?
I think I've given enough of that already.
Okay.
All right, see ya. And they said it wouldn't happen. They doubted me. They doubted me every day. I saw the doubters. The doubters were saying, Liquid Zulu, he's going to have a real problem with Haz Al Din. This is going to be a real bad showing of Liquid Zulu against Haz Al Din. Our god, Haz Al Din, will destroy Liquid Zulu. This was pathetic. The first line of attack I had against him, he terminated in fucking constant evasion. There were doubters in chat even, doubting the direction of my attack, doubting the determinism versus free will direction. It was a weird opening. And it fucking paid off, boys. This is why we are the Zulu Zyke. Zal Zulu, Mal Monhop, Hal Hopper, we are the Zulu Zyke. I think even he understands that he was doing very poorly in that debate. I think this is going to reflect in the history. I don't think he's going to be making very many clips of that debate. I don't think his community is going to be making very many clips of that debate. I want you guys to all go out, make 1 billion clips of this debate. Go out, clip every fucking single second of this debate. Make it a clip, send it onto Twitter, send it onto YouTube, do whatever the fuck you want with it. Monetize that clip. Go ahead, I don't care. I want this clip, I want this debate to be clipped to oblivion. Everybody should see this debate. That's what I want. And now I will go on to read the super chats. Now that my victory lap is done. This was a debate I did prep for. That was only one line of my prep even. That was only one line of my prep. You saw my notes. I only opened one little tab of my notes. And I honestly did not believe that he was going to just deny that he wouldn't take a position on whether he's going to be a free willer or a determinist. He just wouldn't be pinned down on any of those options. I was not expecting that. I was expecting that I'd have to defend capitalism at some point. I'd have to give it the rational defense of capitalism. I was researching like fucking crazy earlier, trying to like completely integrate in my mind how to do that. It wasn't even necessary. It was not even necessary. But yeah, let's read some of these super chats. Pop out chat. Patent funding. Okay, so yeah, if you want super chat read, send it in now. Before that, I'm just going to go take a piss real quick, and then I will come back and read the super chats. I'll be right back. Hello, gentlemen. So, let's get through these super chats. And also, thank you very much to the people who have been gifting memberships. I saw that during the debate. Obviously, there's an attached message, so I can't specifically answer anything. But thank you very much. Like, I saw yeah, this guy, like, fucking 20 memberships. Like, fucking legendary. Thank you very much. Like, that is actually awesome. Yeah, so for the super chats, heterodox agnostic 8070 for 20 kroners. Norwegian kroner, which I believe I did acknowledge at the beginning of the stream, but I'll do it again. Said he's got a few from the Austrian something blah 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 ARCEU, some conference for Austrians, I believe. Here to watch, which hopefully they enjoyed it. I think I did a very good job. I think I made them proud. I didn't even have to go into econ for it, is the thing. I did not even have to go into econ. Like, Jesus Christ. And then another 20 crooner. That was not the wind. Thank you very much. And then 6A8J for 200 crooner. Jesus Christ. Hi. Well, hello, sir. Thank you very much for the money. I believe that's quite a lot. And then from negative 3889 for $2 US. Thank you very much. Tech History warned us about this audio babble. Yeah, I mean, you can see what, like, I talk about when I talk about philosophies, what Tick History talks about when he talks about the ideobabble of these communists. Like, it's a deliberate method they're implementing, that the true knowledge has to be cosseted away into these, or I suppose as Haz would pronounce it, caxeted, or some fucking bullshit. He didn't pronounce any word right. It has to be cosseted away in, like, the upper halls within the inner party, and you can't actually communicate any of it, because you've got to specifically, deliberately obfuscate everything you're saying. This is a specific point in their philosophy here. That's why they do it. If they said what they believe in clear terms, like what I was trying to get Haz to do, if they did that, then suddenly nobody would agree with them. They would not win. They've got to hide it away. Hide away the true ideology for only the priests. That's the problem here. And then Casimir Freeman for $5 US. Thank you very much. Haz was destined to wiggle into this crash spiral. Pure cinema, indeed. On his philosophy, he was predestined to lose this debate. And I think he understands on some level that he did lose this debate. And then Huge Hat Harold for $10 US. Thank you very much. Could there have been an alternative that Zulu didn't blow the fuck out Haz over an hour ago? In his philosophy, there surely couldn't have been. Right? That's what I was trying to pin him on. That how do you get alternatives on your philosophy of dialectical materialism? And he's not able to fucking answer. He's got to just constantly evade. It's nonsense. Alright, hold on. But just before I continue with these super chats, I do have to refill my water. Throughout the day, I have completely emptied my water bottle, unfortunately. But I will be right back. I just have to refill my water. Probably should have done it whilst I was taking a piss, to be honest, but I just forgot about my water. Hello. Goddamn, water is it hits the spot because I was on a fucking millimeter of water like the past half an hour of that debate. Whew. Especially when I'm drinking this fucking vodka. I couldn't find, actually, interestingly enough, I was trying to find some Pepsi. Turns out we ran out of Pepsi. So I wanted some Pepsi to mix my vodka with, that I would, be able to be more amped up, have some sort of mixer, but there was no Pepsi, unfortunately. So I had to just neat vodka and water, unfortunately. But I think it turned out very well for me. And Griff for $10 US. Thank you very much. Can't wait to see how the ACP crowd tries to spin this. Thanks for being a big influence on me. I wouldn't want it any other way. Zal Zulu, indeed. There will be the spin. The spin is gonna come. Believe you me. They're gonna try and spin this in some way. Would it have been possible for you to see Coke? Unfortunately not, because we didn't have any Coke either. We don't buy Coke. Because my brother likes Pepsi more. I like Dr. Pepper personally, but I don't really drink soft drinks that much anyway, so most of my drinking is with water. I don't really have much of a say. It's just mostly Pepsi. But yeah, the ACP crowd, they're gonna spin this. They're absolutely gonna spin this in some way. Be prepared for it. Be prepared for it with clips. Just, again, clip every fucking possible moment of this debate. And just send it out. Link back to the original debate on my channel. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion there. I don't think that Haz's community can maintain for the world that he won this debate. I don't think that's possible. Pardon me. Love Life Anarchy for $5 Australian. Thank you very much. Why do I enjoy this so much? It is very, like, it is Schadenfreude, right? It's enjoyment as another suffering. It's very satisfying to see, like, somebody who's been upheld as, like, this pillar of the communist debate scene for so long, ever since I've started debating, pretty much. It's been upheld that Haz is, like, this insurmountable ghost, that he is completely undefeatable, indefatigable, this man. Try and get Haz to pronounce that word, by the way. Indefatigable. Try and get him to pronounce that. Good luck. Yeah, it's good to see him getting torn down. That's exactly what I wanted to do. This is exactly why Jake Shields is like, no, we can't have any of that. We're gonna have to have, I guess, fucking Dave Smith. Can any of you imagine? Let's switch to the webcam for a second. Can any one of you imagine for 3 moments that Dave Smith could have done any of those moves I pulled on Haz? That he could have done this same flow? That Dave Smith could have ran Haz into this same corner? Nobody believes that for a single fucking second. This is why it's very important for there to be a Liquid Zulu on every fucking corner. Not a Dave Smith. Very important. Way more important to have Liquid Zulus than Dave Smiths. And then, and Griff for another $2. Thank you very much. When is round 2? I'll give you more beer money. I don't know if there's going to be a round 2. This was a very... I had to grab at this one already. And I think it went very well for me. Especially judging by the viewer count. I'm way up on viewers already. I'll give you more beer money. To be clear, the issue with me not having as many beers, it's not because I didn't have I can buy more beers if I wanted to. It's that I just didn't want to walk all the way fucking towards the village and pick up more beers for this debate and then walk all the way back when I've already got vodka in hand. Like, I cannot be bothered to do that. Then we got 4-Man Georgie, who's becoming a member. Thank you very much. Round 2 ECP lol from And Griff for $2. Thank you very much. Indeed, I did have a whole economic calculation problem section as well. Like, I can reveal some of these things now. Let me actually, like, pardon me, say some of these things correctly. I had, like, multiple possible lines of attack against this guy. This was just purely in the anti-communism / materialism band. I was just entirely in this subheading the whole debate, and it completely flummoxed him. But you know, this was a last-minute decision to go for this line of attack primarily, and it paid off massively. I think, you know, the materialism and this heading are related as well. Yeah, like, That was a last minute. I didn't get into really any of the pro-capitalism stuff. Like, I didn't need to. Honestly, I figured he would concede on some of the stuff way earlier. I figured he would go, yeah, we're materialists, which means we're determinists. And then we get into debate about whether or not determinism negates the possibility of knowledge. That's what I figured would happen. And then we'd have that on the flow, and I could build off of that for something else. But that simply just did not happen. My only thought on that is that perhaps he understood where I was trying to go, and he knew I was trying to go in the direction of, well, therefore you can't prove anything. This is true of the capitalist and of the communist. So therefore you can't validate any of your beliefs for me, and that he had no response for that. That's my only thought, and that's why he had to just throw out all this bullshit to obfuscate, so that I would never get there. That's my only thought on that matter, which makes this a very solid opener against any communists in the future. Definitely going to try that one out again. And then Totem Music KBN for $5 US. Thank you very much. I wished you opened the others, to be honest. They are such interesting topics. Indeed, like, I mean, you can see some of my stuff for the others. It's basically that, like, well, for the requirements of mankind as such, for there to be human flourishing, you need capitalism. You can't have it any other way. You need ownership for there to be production. You need production for there to be human flourishing. So you gotta have capitalism. Like, that was basically the thrust of my argument here. No, I think my anti-communism side just kind of handled it already. And again, like, I'm not giving Haz an out here. I'm not going to give him the out of, okay, well then let's move on to the pro-capitalism side. I'm not giving him that out. He either earns that agi. I'm not giving him that agi. He earns that agi. If he can somehow earn that I have to now talk about him with pro-capitalism stuff, then he can force me into that position. But he didn't earn that at all. He was getting completely fucking wrecked. So I have all the agi in the world. I can do whatever the fuck I want with him. I can play with my food as much as I want. I'm not giving him a possible, like, hook to latch into and escape the discussion he's losing. I'm not giving him that escape hatch at all. And then Love Life Anarchy for $5 Australian. Thank you very much. And caps are back. Indeed. We have completely fucking won this one. Like, I've seen Haz debate before. I've seen him debate in person. I was at the debate he had with Prax Ben. You can see me in the audience. I'm there fucking standing ovation every time for Prax Ben. Because Prax Ben is correct. Haz is incorrect. I think we've all seen this on this day. There's no way you can worm out of that fact. Then, oh boy, it's Mercs, who sent 5 gifted memberships. Thank you very much, man. That's very much appreciated. And Griff for another $5 US. Thank you very much. Glad to see Haz be humbled. He's definitely one of these most insufferable people in politics. Yeah, I mean, I can clarify what I was talking about earlier. Like, this guy was... I can show some of the correspondence, I guess. Like, I mean, just go on to Haz Al Din's server right now and search for mentions Liquid Zulu. And you can see the way that they have treated me. They have been ruthless. They have been very rude. These are not polite people at all. That's why I wasn't approaching this guy. I wasn't letting him maintain the pretense of politeness that he tried to establish in the beginning, which I was surprised by. I thought he'd immediately be going into fucking chimp mode. But he tried to maintain some pretense of cordiality. Try to get Haz to say that word. And I did not let him keep that up for the entire debate. I want to be very clear about why, because this guy was talking to me in a very condescending manner. This guy and his whole community were ripping me to shit. Like, I messed up one fucking time zone conversion, which he also fucking messed up, by the way. He said the wrong goddamn time zone. He said EST. I want to be at EST. No, he's not in EST. He's in ET. EDT. Eastern Daylight Time. He's got Daylight Savings active for him right now. So he messed up already. And this whole server trying to fucking, like, you're a fucking retard. You don't know how to fuck, whether you're in GMT or BST. Like, it was one fucking mistake. He wasn't fucking saying, like, no, I mean actually this time. He wasn't using the Discord inbuilt time conversion feature. He was just leaving me out to hang. So fuck this guy. Fuck this guy. I don't like him at all. He was being very rude in the lead up to this. I'm going to be rude right fucking back. Like, you think that's outside the debate? It's not going to matter? No, it does matter, actually. I'm going to be cruel against you. When I've won, I'm going to fucking grind you into the goddamn dirt. Just the same as you would have done to me. Just the exact same. He would have done this a million times over. If I'd lost, he would have ground me into the dirt. How do you think Haz would feel if he didn't eat breakfast this morning? Well, I mean, he's pretty cranky, so maybe he didn't. But yeah, no, like, it is astounding. These people, it looks like they just can't actually comprehend hypothetical scenarios. I think it's deeper than that, more evil than that. It's not just that they're incompetent. It's that they have completely restructured the English language and philosophy such that it just cuts away hypotheticals. It takes a large level of intelligence to integrate all this stuff. But that just makes it even more evil. Like, it's not just that they're retarded and like 70 IQ. It's that they're deliberately avoiding like the plain English words we all use. And then we got Exiled to the Void for 100.22 ARS. Thank you very much. I'm not familiar with that currency. ACPists like Haz are a waste of time. They're just campists. They lack any philosophy other than Machiavellianism. Haz literally believes in Lysenkoism. He's clearly a few cards short of a full deck. Indeed, as has been shown, when you've got competent debaters on both sides. You know, Jake Shields would have fucking seen this if he'd bothered. When you got competent debaters on both sides, the capitalists win out, actually. I've been told Haz is like this fucking insurmountable demon of a debater. Turns out not so much. When you just push him on the philosophy, he folds. And actually, let me show you something. Because I did do one pushing of him technically before. Yeah, this video of Prax Ben's debate with Haz Al Din. You'll see me in the audience right there. You notice also in this video that I am the highlight of the video, as declared by the people in Sponsor Block, with the Sponsor Block extension. I'm the highlight. This is my question to Haz Al Din. Well, I push him and you'll see he doesn't fucking answer.
Can shoot better than any communist in this room.
We'll see.
Excellent. Please go ahead. Yeah, so I just want like a quick point of clarification. In Haz's opening statement, he mentioned that there were a lot of contradictions present in the current system. I just want to know whether it's Haz's position or even the American Communist Party's official position that there can exist contradictions, i.e. that contradictions can be true.
So, can contradictions be true? That's the question.
Well, I don't, listen, we don't have to turn this into a philosophy debate.
Doesn't want to turn it into philosophy debate. Doesn't want to engage.
I'll make it very simple for you. You have a manufacturing base, to have strong industry, to have good, well-paying jobs.
And also, yeah, there is a certain mod in the crowd as well. I don't know if he wants doxing, I suppose.
The people.
Actually, no. Casimir's face is public. Yeah, you can see that that's clearly Casimir. Like, his face is public already. You can see him laughing.
Listen, we don't have to turn this into a philosophy debate. I'll make it very simple for you. You have a contradiction between the need for America to have a manufacturing base.
Now you can see he's going into a script. There's a contradiction between America needing to have a manufacturing base versus blah, 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 blah. This is not what I asked. I asked if contradictions are true. That's what I asked, and you can't answer.
To have strong industry, to have...
Every single person knows what you mean when you say, are contradictions true? Every person knows what you mean by that. He knows what I mean by that. All the communists in the crowd know what I mean by that. But he can't answer. He can't give me a straight answer. He's not able to. His ideology says that he shouldn't give me a straight answer, as contradictory as that is, because he doesn't believe in shoulds, or at least he can't. But again, he's a contradictory man. This is a person who is a Muslim. But let me bring up what Karl Marx said about religion. In the social production of their existence, men inevitably enter into blah, 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 blah. Is that the right quote? No, it is not. Yeah, there are, besides, eternal truths such as freedom, justice, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes religion and all morality, instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience. If you ever experience a Muslim Marxist, you understand what they mean by contradiction. They're fine with contradiction. It doesn't matter to them. That's what they mean. Yeah, let's continue this clip.
Have good, well-paying jobs for the people, and on the other hand, the need to maintain the global system where the dollar is the main reserve currency. So that's an example of a contradiction at the heart of the global system, where one is coming at the expense of the other, and it's leading to a lot of political instability and polarization here, as we saw with the rise of Trump in 2015, 2016. So there's no need to, get into kind of debates.
No need to get into philosophy. I wonder why that might be. Because he can't. He clearly can't.
About propositional logic or whatever. This is concretely what I mean.
Ben.
Again, he can't get into philosophy. He can't allow any interrogation of that beyond that point. He can't. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know it good enough. He doesn't know how to bullshit well enough to get around someone like me. That's it. That's all I had to say about that. Now, where's my goddamn super chat window? Here it is. Bro got mollywhopped for $2 from Eli YJ4PT, who has been on the Remnant podcast before, I believe. Indeed. He got completely fucking destroyed. And then Jeff Hamilton, who is now a member for 4 months on the small boy tier. Thank you very much. Then another from Anne Griff for another $5. Thank you very much, man. That's very much appreciated. We should make parody accounts of them and spam them with the Zulu praise. Go ahead. I completely endorse all clipping of my content, especially this debate. Make sure to clip this thing fucking left, right, and center. Send it as far wide as you can manage. Monetize it if you want. I don't care. You'll notice Haz wasn't willing to encourage his own community to clip this debate. You'll notice that, I think. Ooh. You see, I didn't speak enough in the actual debate. My mouth wasn't drying out as much. Now I'm just the only guy speaking, so it's drying out a bunch. Also, I've drank a lot more vodka, so that dries out your mouth as well. From Doge B7X for 150 shekels. Thank you very much, man. You'll not be very popular with the Haz community, I imagine. Just woke up. What's the recap? LMAO. So the recap is, I think this is basically the essence of the debate. That he's got two choices. That either man can choose or man can't choose. And I think on either of those threads, I've got him. If there are choices, well then men could choose to not follow the dialectic process. There could be a certain society which is born of their choices at any given time, and the dialectic process doesn't determine them to have a certain type of society. Or there are no choices in which he can't validate anything. He's just determined to believe whatever he's going to believe. That's the essence of this debate, which I think is a very strong counter to the communists. Clearly, very strong. And then another from Jeff Hamilton for another $2 Canadian. Thank you very much. Zulu, please give me beer recommendations. Probably the only beer I could recommend as like something you should really go out and try to get, as against just like, pick up whatever the fuck's at the shop or what have you. Birds and Bees. It's a Scottish brewery. Very good beer. Very good beer. They do pale ale. Very good beer. I would recommend. I've drank it on stream before, I believe, because there's like the only beer left in stock in our house. And then Monhop, get friend of the channel, co-host on the Remnant podcast, of course, has become a member for the 6th month in a row. Thank you very much. Trunk Monkey 5229 for $5. Thank you very much. I just started the philosophical theory of history. Just got to Aristotle. Thanks for the recommendation. I've enjoyed it a lot. What other arguments did you prepare? So yeah, that's referring to Leonard Peikoff's History of Philosophy course on YouTube, which you can watch for free. It's just on YouTube. It's history of ancient philosophy, at least. It's history of modern philosophy. Well, let's say it's paywalled, but it is possible to get around paywalls such as that. But yeah, what other arguments did I prepare? I prepared for, if he brought up the age of consent, I would bring up that Scott Ritter is their guy. He is a convicted sex offender. He's their man. That's their guy. That's your man's, And if he brought up anything about like denying the communist deaths, well, actually Eddie Liger-Smith, another one of their guys, he said that 50 million Chinese people dying under Mao was not a bad thing. So he's like, okay, so you're disagreeing with that guy. Because he's saying that there were these deaths, and they were a good thing. Okay. On the dialectical material theory of history, it's basically the same thing. I'm basically getting these two sections from Peikoff's lecture in the history of modern philosophy. And then, obviously, the economic calculation problem. I reviewed Divinity's debate with Andrew Wilson because he had some very good rhetorical stings in there. I wanted to make sure I had noted down if I needed them. And then rational defense. This is basically just the standard Ayn Rand defense of capitalism. And then the NEP is my own spin on it. How I get inductively to the first comer principle. You can learn more about that on my podcast yesterday on the Ask ANCAP channel. It's a call-in show. You can call into it. It runs every single Saturday at the same time. Go on Ask ANCAP. Look for the Discord. He posts the Discord link every single time. In fact, let me post the Discord link. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He'd probably encourage it, indeed. Let me see. Invite to server. Invite link. Fires never. Generate a new link. Copy. So yeah, this is the Ask ANCAP Discord server. If you want to call in, it's a weekly call-in show hosted by myself and Galazar. where we respond to all of your questions you might have. You can call in through the Discord server. And yeah, that's about it. Make sure to subscribe to that channel as well. The Ask ANCAP channel, because it needs to get monetized very soon. It needs to be monetized. But yeah. And yeah, the previous episode, there was a whole section where I was going back and forth with a guy on this NAP argument, the inductive argument for the NAP. There's a whole section on that, so you can look at that if you want more information. And then from Monhop for 15 Australian dollars. Thank you very much, man. That's very much appreciated. Colin Zulu W, next episode of The Remnant coming soon, indeed. We can get something scheduled this week. By the way, Monhop, I will be available American times in the coming week up until Friday. Friday being the termination, so not American times on Friday. Because I'll be alone in the house. So I'll be able to stay up late and be as loud as I want. So yeah, well, let me know when you wanna do the next Remnant. And then another from And Griff for $5 US. Thank you very much. This is why he sticks to his live stream debates, lol. Not sure what specifically that's in reference to. Yeah, like, indeed, I want to have live stream debate, because things like this can happen. Oh, reveal the alert of unusual join activity in Monhop. In Ask ANCAP. Mark is resolved, yeah. Increase activity from normal members, no action needed. Let me just actually, I should tell him what's going on. Alright, okay, so. Yeah. That I like to live stream debates because, yeah, things like this can happen. And now he can't take it back. He can't take this back. He's on live. He's caught in 4K. And also I get a lot more money from live streams, as it turns out. Because people like to give me super chats, like all you lovely people. So, I get a lot more money from live streams, believe you me, than like if I was to upload this as like a fucking 4-hour long video. It would not get anywhere near as much money. So, Alfonso Diel-Buquerque. Alfonso Diel-Buquerque, 1879 for 10 R dollars. Thank you very much. Epistemology is the best way to attack communism and expose its dogmatic thinking. Yeah, I think so. I think just, cut down to the root of what they're actually saying, and it becomes revealed as a complete fraud. Complete intellectual fraud. Like, it's nonsense. Like, that's why they speak in these terms. That's why they have to be the politician. That's why they can't just be honest and open and say what they're saying. They've got to hide it away. If they don't, everybody understands that they're retarded. And another from And Griff for another $5 US. Thank you very much. I genuinely think that he just wants his own little Stalin cult of personality for himself, and the kids who idealize him get it. Yeah, that's pretty much what it seems like. They just want to all, like, they criticize the fascists, but they all worship the party of Haz. They worship the party. Haz can never be wrong. They gotta worship the party. It's insane. Yeah. Anyway, but there's a problem in the thing. I dealt with it. And Griff for another $10 US. Thank you very much. I know I've been chatty here, but the ACP has been active in Ohio, so it's been getting uncomfortably close to home, literally. And the neocons are being the useful idiots for them. So it's personal, indeed. And thank you very much for the funding. And, you know, if I keep getting funding like this, then I can keep clapping down these ACP retards. And I can keep going after them. Which, but, you know, by the way, the fucking Eddie Liger Smith, one of the other big ACP bigwigs, he's been dodging prac spend for years at this point. Like, these people, when these debates actually happen, when the stars align and we're able to get them into a debate, it fucking goes our way every single time. Is the ACP the MAGA communism party from the laissez faire for $2 US? Thank you very much. Indeed it is. That's pretty much it. They're the MAGA communists. They're not they're not accepted anywhere. The Democratic Socialists of America don't like them. The Democrats don't like them. Nobody really likes them. So, because they're too socially conservative for the socialists, they're communists, so the capitalists don't like them. Nobody really likes these people. But they've got their own little community there. Then we got Exile to the Void for 100.22 ARS. Thank you very much, man. I'm assuming that's a lot of money. It's a gold super chat, so we'll assume it's roughly equivalent to $10. So thank you very much. Sheiks literally insist that Marxism and Islam are contradictory and incompatible, by the way. Please Google, are Marxism and Islam mutually compatible? It's a short read, an article on Islamicity. Yeah, I mean, Marx says that Islam and Marxism are incompatible. The Islamists are saying that Marxism and Islam are incompatible. I don't know where Haz is getting caught up in here. It is literally because he believes contradictions can be true, so he's just totally fine with it. It's nonsense. What is Divinity versus Wilson? So that is the debate. Let me pull up that debate.
Count. And
Pause. So that is this debate between Andrew Wilson and Prophet Divinity on Eduardo's channel, where I'm gonna be honest, guy, Andrew Wilson gets completely fucking schooled. So I definitely reference this debate to see if there are any relevant talking points for me going against Haz. I'll link this in the chat as well. If you want to see that debate, you can go ahead and see that debate. Yeah, then Griff for another $5 US. Thank you very much. I'm glad I could contribute with the Ritter, Lamau. Rousseau is another, the sexual offender, presumably. They love. Well, yeah, I saw that before. I was already considering the Ritter angle already. Before I saw that on Twitter, they had posted that. But yeah, no. If there are more sex offenders in connection with the ACP, make sure to send them my way. I'd always love to know about it. So I've got that just like fucking ace in the hole against them. And of course he didn't try to go there, and if he did, he would have had big problems. And then a final one from And Griff for another $2 US. Thank you very much, man. That's a lot of money. Zal Zulu W. Looking forward to more content. Indeed, there will be more content. I'm going to try and get some more debates scheduled for this week. We're on a high right now, boys. We're going to keep riding this high right to the top. There's... Obviously, I won this debate. Very handedly. Haz was completely destroyed. I'm going to keep destroying people this week. Don't you worry, guys. I've got plenty of fucking time. Stay up as late as I fucking won this week. So, yeah, we're going to have more live streams, more debates, and we'll see how it goes. So thank you very much, everybody who came along, especially those who donated. Donated a lot of money here. A lot of money. You don't have to give that money to me. I thank you very much for it. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.